Happy Friday. I think we are ready to roll. As per usual, Friday is going to be pretty chill, especially since we just kind of came off of such a such a crazy work grind. So, yeah, now all we're left to do is chill and have some fun. So, I think we're just going to watch some stuff, starting with our favorite Gact. Oh, this is. Oh, yeah. So much content. This just gets us in the mood. Man, I don't know why this is so loud right now. But. Yo, Darmadam, what's good? Good morning. We're starting off our day with cats and dogs as per usual. Just a little chill bit. But yeah, I don't have too much planned for this stream. I don't know what we should be watching. Regular day. Yeah, I guess happy weekend. Yeah, we do have to, I guess, consider what is like next in this channel's crosshairs. Like, what are we trying to do? I mean, we could always go to part 2 stuff. I do need to finish the read-throughs for part 1 of the document. I think there's more content to get out of part 1 of the document for sure. Technically, all the consciousness stuff it's all been just chilling in this experience in the moment area. Like, we've just been stuck on this for like 2 months now. So we might want to start talking about what it might mean for us to understand something, what that looks like in our brain, etc. And then we could get to the conceptual framework. Do you ever speak on potential traps of goal setting? I have not spoken on that yet, but I think that is going to be certainly something we want to do in part 2. When we're doing identifying goals to pursue, determining where to go, the art and science of goal setting. So within this, we're going to want to do the what you're saying, the potential traps. The potential traps of goal setting. Jail setting. Yeah, that's 100% something we want it in there. Yeah, there's so much to do in part 2 that I'm wondering if we should just move on to part 2 stuff, but there's more content to be had. I wanted to take one day this week to do a retrospective on consciousness, because I think what I'm kind of realizing is that it's probably inappropriate for me to use the word physicalism to describe what we're even talking about here. Like, technically, the framework that I push is not a physicalism framework, or not a physicalist framework, and it's not idealist either. It's like we could either say it's just normative pragmatic. So that's me always harping on the fact that what really matters is how we talk about these things. And then there's also the pragmatic naturalist way, where it's like kind of taking that normative pragmatism and looking at the, a naturalistic explanation for consciousness. So I think it might be useful to do that. And I do want to have a video that covers that topic, but hopefully I could get that, hopefully that script only takes 10 minutes to read. So I don't know when we would want to do that. We could do that now, or we could do that later. I'm not sure. We want to do the short form content though. We want to do a short form day. Let's do that. Let's put that on Thursday. Thursday's going to be short form brainstorming. Wonderful. Friday is just going to be chill, as per usual. Nice. All right, we got a week. We got a week ahead of us. But yeah, the one thing I wanted to go through is like the roadmap. I just moved this all back to November and December. So the referencing effort, I'm going to say that's medium priority. It really should be done, though I don't think we're going to blow up so fast that that's going to get us into a lot of trouble. I think what needs to happen really is high priority needs to be get the references in there, get the citations in there. But then low priority is going to be right. I've been calling it bibliographic complements for citations. So I'm going to bump this up to high. We should do that. Content creation, we do need a film, the shaping of experience. I think we could definitely do that within the end of this year. This is high. Maybe. All right, so let's do read through for just the shaping of the experience, and then maybe medium would be film, read through. Because I don't think there's too much stuff to cover in that area. Film through, read through for, what is it? Conceptualizing our understanding? Is that what we call this thing? Conceptualizing our understanding, yeah. Oops. Yo, Filcher, how's it going? Happy Friday. Unless it's Saturday for you as well. Slash meaning seeking. Oh, so the traps of meaning seeking specifically, like the trap of trying to find specific meaning, where you know we know that meaning's rather dynamic. Well, thank you. Same. Hell yeah. Yeah, I think there can be traps there. Yep, I do agree. I think we could cover that all in that one topic, and I think that should be a large topic. Before the end of the year, so we want to get those two in. Stream edits. I'm less gung-ho about the stream edits, because I feel like maybe we could just keep a... I'm just wondering what type of brand we want for YouTube. Like, do we want only really high quality videos, or do we want just a lot of videos? And it might be more pragmatic to do the high volume versus high quality, but that isn't to say that the videos that we post from stream wouldn't be edited and wouldn't be substantive. It just wouldn't be as substantive as scripted videos that take me 2 weeks. Meaning shouldn't be too complicated. Axioms, definienda. I'm actually not quite used to those terms. Let's are these true? Can you help me understand these? Right, we know axioms. Assumed to be true without proof. Okay. Oh. Man, these dudes are just chilling. Man, I wish I could own a pet. A definiendum, plural is definienda, is the word or phrase being defined. Okay. Triangle is the definiendum. And then the definiens, definientia, is a word or phrase that provides the definition, the expression that explains the meaning of the definiendum. Interesting. Right. So yeah, we in a dictionary, the definiens is the word defined, the definienda, the dictionary entry. So as per usual, like we take a we don't take as an analytic approach like that. Like for me, when we're talking about meaning, we are talking about something that's felt, like an aspect of experience. And we've already done that. We've already done the so in the the experience in the moment section, we have this whole experience of meaning. This is where we kind of have a phenomenology of meaning. So this is very akin to like a Heidegger type of phenomenology. And then we ground that in science here. And yeah. And then we kind of put it all together in this making sense of experience. Having explored how meaning arises in lived experience and trace the scientific processes that shape it, we can now bring these perspectives into alignment. We intuitively experience the world as meaningful, yet this immediacy does not itself explain why it feels meaningful in the first place, why certain things appear obvious, important, or self-evident. I even talk about the hard problem of consciousness here. I probably use the hard problem of consciousness like... Yeah, we say it very few. Actually, we do have a whole section on that. Yeah, look at that. We name drop it like only a few times because I think some of these occurrences are from they're from both the TLDR version and the main takeaways version. Is that right? Oh, it's the to do. Interesting. Oh, too long didn't read. And then this might be the main, this is the main takeaways, yeah. So where were we? We were here. Okay. Okay, that's fine too. Then what matters is Chomsky's prescriptive guideline. Obscure and intuition-bound notions can neither lead to absurd conclusions nor provide new and correct ones. And hence they fail to be useful in two important respects. Or prescriptive, I guess. Or proscriptive. What's the difference between prescriptive and proscriptive? Let me check proscriptive. Forbidding. Oh wow, I didn't know that. That's incredible. I agree. Like I think we take that stance here. So a couple of ways to go into that. When we're conceptualizing our understanding, like conceptualizing the things that we experience, like the meaning we experience, you know, I choose to go with a framing of a conceptual framing where you know, I think of these things as concepts, and that allows us to talk about the relations that certain concepts have between each other. And following Hegel, we can go, you know, relations of incompatibility and consequence. So what things imply, what things imply are impossible, etc. So that's you know, that's the prescription and the proscription. And yeah, when we're talking about concepts and we're talking about the normative aspect of concepts. Oh, and the normative aspect we get to here, where we kind of point out that we can think about these as norms, given how we learn information. We learn information as if it's a rule. Like I always give the example, like when a parent teaches a kid like what some object is. You know, I keep using the example of a sun because that you might be able to picture that in like a kid's book. The parent points at the picture and says that is a sun. And so the kid is learning a rule. And the rule is really more fundamental here than what the sun is, like the semantics behind it. There's like a priority of the normative aspect of what's going on. It's conditioning the kid. And that's what learning is most fundamentally. So we could consider these things as norms, as abstract pointing. And so yeah, the question is then if like if our concepts hold the very rules for what counts as proper use, let's just say. So like if the kid were to look at the sun and say that is a moon, or if the kid were to look at the moon and say that is the sun, we'd say that the concept of the sun doesn't allow the kid to say that. Like the kid's doing something wrong. And so when we're talking about ambiguous terms or ambiguous concepts, ambiguous communication in general, obscure and intuition-bound notions, we could see how many different people might imply or infer many different things from those ambiguous communications. So that's where we get into this trouble, where leads to absurd conclusions, so leads to absurd inferences, and and perhaps it doesn't provide new or correct ones, in the sense that no one infers what you're actually trying to get at. No one's following your logic because you're using ambiguous terms. Now, people usually get away with using ambiguous terms because a lot of people might be thinking very different things, but because they can fit it within their own rule set, then it feel like everyone feels like, oh, it makes sense. And then you realize, oh, we all think different things. But that's where it's really nice to have like very broad frameworks, which I think that like religions do really well, and spiritual practices do that really well, in such a way where everyone can take different meaning. Like even just the idea of like a God, which is, you know, quite abstract. Like people could have different relationships with their own minds, and in such a way where they could feel like this is God. And it works because it's so abstract. It can map onto everyone's unique experience, which is quite effective. And then, of course, when we talk about norms and normative practices in the document, we are highlighting predictive processing as what drives our noticing that someone has broken the rules, and it also drives our learning. So it's been a while since we've read this stuff, but this is always fun stuff. Our exploration has led us to view concepts as dynamic and context sensitive. A word like bank means one thing if we are discussing finance, and something entirely different if we are on a river. What tells us which set of semantic relations is appropriate to apply? In order to answer this question, we can shift our perspective. We can begin to think about concepts not just as descriptive labels, but as embodying implicit rules for their own proper use. This normative perspective suggests that we are not at liberty to apply concepts in any way we please if we wish to make sense. These are not objective laws like those of physics, but implicit standards that constitute our shared world of meaning. The semantic relations of incompatibility and consequence we discussed earlier can now be understood as the content of these very rules. For instance, the semantic fact that a cat is not a dog corresponds to a normative prescriptive rule. One ought not apply the concept cat in such a way that it is also a dog. These are exclusive. To do so is to make a mistake, to violate the implicit rule that governs the concepts plural, possessive, intelligible use. Jago, either way, there's only one kind of bank that I make. Oh, hell yeah. And that's a completely different type of usage. Like we could see how intuitive that, like the way you just use that word is so culturally contingent, and it's so novel to, you know, the past 50 years. Did people say that 50 years ago? Was that even a saying? I doubt it. We can ground this idea of rule following in our lived experience by connecting it back to the neurobiological reality of prediction error. When our application of a concept conflicts with the world, it triggers a violation of expectation. We can think of this felt sense of dissonance, of things not being as they ought to be, as the experience of prediction error. For example, if someone points to a cat and says, "Look at that lovely dog," we experience a moment of cognitive friction. This friction, this jarring affective response signals that a conceptual norm has been breached. So yeah, I feel like this channel's goal is to push people out of the idea of like the analytic mindset where things just there's like a rule set that is objective, and it's all about how we feel. It's all about the subjective experience. So yeah, that's why I was saying that I don't think we're allowed to call ourselves physicalists, even though we arrive at a description of or an explanation of the physical world that makes sense of even the very thoughts that we have. All right, what do we want to do? What do we want to do with our time? Any topics that anyone wants to go into? Any deep dives? I mean, I could read this document all day, but I don't want to put people to sleep. Contextual, for example, to table a bill in the U.S. means to close it off for consideration, but in other countries it means to open it for consideration and vote. Hell yeah. Yeah, it's like like our culture is a huge deal when we're talking about our understanding. And one of the things I want to do, which I actually have slated for next week, what makes you unique, is for part 2, we have a section, like an early section, where, yeah, the context of you, where so this is like the big practical part where we're considering how to identify and pursue our goals. I find it that it's necessary to really look into every single thing that might make a person unique. Every single topic here. Now, granted, we get into like the nitty gritty of this topic, or at like the base level, when we talk about the notion of predisposition, genetics, nature, and nurture. Yeah, we go deep into this. When we consider why people differ in their thoughts, feelings, or actions, we often attribute these variations to temperament or personality. Some people are naturally cautious, others adventurous. Some feel emotions intensely, others take life in stride. These intuitions reflect a reality. Each of us possesses inherent tendencies that influence how we interact with the world. But what underlies these tendencies, and how do they interact with experience over time? So yeah, we get into genetics, genome, human genome. Crucially, the human genome is overwhelmingly shared. About 99.9% of our DNA is identical to that of every other human being, giving rise to the universal features of human experience: our core emotions, the basic structure of perception, our reactions to danger, and our drive for social connection. These shared systems are what make human experience intelligible across cultures and individuals. Yet within this shared architecture, genetic variation still plays an important role. Small differences in DNA can influence a wide range of traits. Yeah. And then we use epigenetics to like further kind of get into the nurture side here. Our genetic mechanisms are not executed in isolation from the world. Their effects unfold through continuous interaction with the environment. The dynamic relationship is governed in part by epigenetic mechanisms, biochemical processes that influence whether a gene is expressed or silenced based on environmental conditions. Epigenetics does not change the DNA sequence itself, but it does modify how accessible certain genes are momentarily, effectively turning them. Modify how accessible certain genes are momentarily. That's not a great phrase here. We should put momentary just before modify, but it does momentarily modify how accessible certain genes are, effectively turning them on or off. A useful metaphor is to think of our genome as a piano. The keys represent our genes, and life experiences determine which keys are played, in what sequence, and with what intensity, producing the unique melody of an individual life. This is me just always looking for the musical metaphor. But yeah, we need to go further into that. Yeah, we kind of consider different things here. Like we got temperament here. What we're doing here is just kind of laying out the scene. So we bring up temperament here, but we only give it this one paragraph. In part 2, we need to go into temperament traits. We got to look into openness and introversion and stuff like that. The question of agreed upon definitions of words. Oh, let me see. Don't know how central that last question was to your thesis, but the question of agreement in words is treated very authoritatively in Chomsky's syntactic structures, and still more thoroughly in his logical structure of linguistic theory, and before Chomsky in Nelson Goodman's The Structure of Appearance. So the question of agreed upon definitions of words. Right. So I guess, yeah, what is the question here? The dog versus the cat thing. But the question of is treated very authoritatively. So yeah, I guess I'm wondering what it means for the agreement to be treated authoritatively. Whales aren't fish. Tomatoes are fruit, not vegetables. Right. So yeah, I'm wondering. I guess I'm just wondering what's your question here? I think maybe we should just read the epilogue here, the foundation of shared meaning, because this is perhaps the most fun part of this whole document. Yep, Chomsky, for example, makes the point that semantics are almost impossible to deal with, and so we concern ourselves principally with the syntax. Right. I think what gets us out of that trouble is to look at the priority of the normative side. Like Brandon always kept saying, like, semantics and norms are two sides of the same coin. But then he even said the normative side has priority. And he wasn't even doing that in like a way that was grounding it in neuroscience, which I think we could easily do. I think we could more intuitively just ground it to the science. The fact that what we're doing when we're learning things and when we're applying concepts is, mechanisms in the brain, whether it's habitual mechanisms for just apply, like when I'm speaking right now, like there's habitual autonomic mechanisms that are allowing me to just kind of run through all this stuff. My mind isn't even like focusing on most of these words. Like I'm not like reflecting on what I'm saying here. I'm kind of reflecting on the movement, and then a lot of stuff is happening behind the scenes that it's allowing me to like just run through this really quickly. And then of course, the predictive processing side of this, when something goes wrong and some sort of prediction error occurs, then I become aware of what I'm doing. And that type of becoming aware, this goes back to the first consciousness video. It actually puts our attention on something, allowing us to learn. So same thing when I'm listening to you. Mechanisms of my brain are spinning like cogs and gears, right? Yeah, you could be even thinking about something else while this stuff is slowly seeping in. All right. This I don't think I've read this in a while, so I think I'm going to read through this, as I think it's quite fun. So yeah, just to give the context here, this whole part 1 is about how we can understand our experience of the world and of ourself, and ultimately how we can derive some sense of freedom from that. So the entire, or the majority of part one is actually a very like individual exploration, even though we look at how social dynamics affects the individual. We look at we look at the big picture, but it's always what does this imply towards an individual's experience and understanding. But then in this epilogue, we now say, given what we've just discussed, how can we make sense of the fact that there's seemingly collective knowledge of the world? Like there's just knowledge that, like, we share knowledge in theory, right? Like we both understand that this is a pen, or I should say we all understand that this is a pen. So how does that make sense if everyone's understanding is unique and dynamic? And so that's what this epilogue is all about. And once again, it's a rather pragmatic look at this stuff. Having established a framework for how an individual makes sense of the world, we now confront the problem of intersubjectivity. The account of meaning developed in part one was, by necessity, focused on the single agent's predictive and normative engagement with their environment. But how do we bridge the gap between these private worlds of experience? How does a stable, shared, and public reality arise from a multitude of individuals, each with their own unique history of learning and a distinct perspective? That's a bad sentence also. Each with their own unique history of learning. How about this? Unique learning history and distinct perspective. We don't even have to do learning. We should just do it. Each with their own unique history and distinct perspective. This section will argue that the foundation of shared meaning is deeply pragmatic, developing long before the emergence of Homo sapiens from evolutionary pressures and the demand of cooperative activity. And does each refer to the multitude or to the reality that arises? Ooh. How does a stable, shared, and public reality arise from a multitude of individuals? In this one, I think grammar actually helps us out. I think when you do a comma each like this, it goes to the last. Oh, but it would... a multitude of individuals. But yeah, I do see it. So it would be... This is the noun that I think each would have to cover, but it's not covering individuals, it's covering the multitude. How does a stable, shared, since each, given that each individual has their own unique history and distinct perspective? It's not great, but it might be a little better. How does a shared, stable, and public reality arise from a multitude of individuals, given that each individual has their own unique history and distinct perspective? I think that works. I think that's fine. But I appreciate that. I think that was a little better than what we had. And that's what this document's all about. It's about slowly making each part better and hopefully in response to people just providing feedback. And then, we build this up as our own guide for navigating life. All right, the evolutionary architecture of shared meaning. To understand how we arrived at the complex shared worlds we inhabit today, we must begin our story not with human history, but with the deep history of life itself. The capacity for shared meaning is not a recent invention, but the culmination of a multi-billion-year evolutionary journey. By retrospectively applying the principles of our framework speculatively through time, we can trace the emergence of the very architecture that makes our reality possible. The story begins with the most fundamental principle of life. An organism exists in a constant feedback loop with its environment. For the simplest life forms, this is a basic stimulus response system where an internal state changes in response to the world, leading to a behavior. As we previously outlined, a major evolutionary leap occurred with the development of complex nervous systems and eventually a limbic system. This introduced a new powerful layer to the internal state, affective embodied experience. The stimulus response loop was now mediated by feelings like fear, pleasure, or pain, marking the dawn of a recognizable subjective experience. So this is where I kind of imply a case where we can somewhat intuit what our ancestors were, what consciousness was like for our ancestors who just had the limbic system, even though it's really going to be very different from what we experience. But we could see the intuitive origins of predictive processing as the brain evolves from a simple reactor to a sophisticated predictor, guided by the felt quality of its experience. Right, so it's a big deal that valence was how do I do this? Valence neuroscience. That valence was introduced. Right, the study of how the brain processes the pleasantness or unpleasantness of emotional stimuli. Like we can see valence in the brain. Like this is something that we notice happening. And so we see like a clear way that our brain is now signaling whether something is good or bad at the basic level. And of course, this is more complicated than that. But I think as our neuroscience developed, it was like we discovered this simplistic measure of valence, or we discovered simplistic measures of valence, and then we found the complexity behind that. But I know a cat's scared when I see it jump, and I can kind of relate. Yeah. Yep. Any of the mammals, and I think there's a few other, maybe not even just a few, but a lot of other animals other than mammals, but certainly mammals have that similar like jump in reaction to noise, for example. I've seen this definition of valence. First, I've seen it in a useful context. Nice. Yep. I mean the whole valence thing was a huge deal in terms of the homeostasis development argument. It's like that like valence is a mapping of information. It's like, is this information good or bad? And so this is where we could see that our brain starts developing these more complex mappings of what's happening. And so with good and bad, we get to approach and what's the other word? What's the opposite of approach? Back away from? Avoid. Avoidance and approach. Which I think is pretty fundamental for us. Finally, the massive expansion of the prefrontal cortex marked the key biological differentiator for the human lineage. This development provided the capacity for unprecedented levels of abstraction, long-term planning, self-reflection, and complex symbolic processing. This evolutionary journey culminated in the specific biological disposition that is the common ground for modern humans: our shared neurological architecture, affective systems, and cognitive tools. This is the nature we are born with. Social coordination was inextricably connected to this entire development. We can most appropriately think about language here not simply as words, but most abstractly as any communally developed stimulus response system, chemical, audio, visual, etc., that allowed communication among organisms. So obviously we know that ants communicate in highly sophisticated ways, but they're not obviously speaking like humans do. I don't know if they use audio, or is it just smells? I know we make sense of it as smells, but whatever they're doing, it's just some type of signal. It's some type of stimulus response system. For humans, this abstract language becomes a crucial part of the environment that each individual's predictive brain integrates. When one individual produces a signal, it acts as a powerful piece of sensory data for another, creating a cascade of predictions about the first individual's intentions, beliefs, and future actions. This constant, interactive loop of signaling and modeling is the very mechanism by which meaning is shared and negotiated. Pheromones. Okay. Yeah, what is even like the definition of pheromones? chemical signals secreted by organisms to trigger social responses in other members of the same species. Nice. Playing a vital role in communication. So I know, yeah, these are often discussed when referring to sex dynamics, but warning of danger as well, marking territory and laying down food trails. So yeah, do we always make sense of that as like just airborne? I think usually when we think like in the human way, when we think of airborne chemicals, we think of smell or touch. Like we wouldn't think of hearing. But I think usually smell is the one that is most intuitive for us. But obviously, you know, these other species have highly different peripheral sensory systems, so it wouldn't be apt to call it one of those. At least I don't think. Okay, we can understand the coevolution of our biology and our culture through the lens of the Baldwin effect, which states that learned behaviors can influence the direction of evolution. At the group level, this process describes a powerful social feedback loop. When a group develops a more effective culture, one that allows for better coordinating and hunting, more precise warnings, or stronger social bonds, that group as a whole gains a significant survival advantage. This very success creates a new selective pressure within the group. Individuals whose genetic disposition makes them slightly better at learning, processing, and contributing to this newly effective cultural system are more likely to thrive and reproduce. Over generations, our biology adapted to our increasingly effective culture, and our culture co-evolved with our biology. So like our biology probably, especially, you know, for speaking and even like hand movements like this probably evolved because of the cultures that were developed with the more primitive versions of the systems themselves. Like primitive speaking was utilized culturally, and then that affected whether or not certain DNA lived on. It is crucial to highlight that at every step of the way, this development was still grounded in the personal biological mechanisms of the organism. The primitive brain's drive for survival provided the fundamental behaviors of approach and avoidance, there it is, within the social context. The limbic system then layered these behaviors with profound affective meaning, making social inclusion feel like a rewarding pleasure and exclusion feel like a painful threat, thus providing the emotional engine for cooperation. Finally, the prefrontal cortex provided the capacity to model these complex social realities, to understand abstract norms, and to wield the new tool of explicit structured language to navigate this intricate web of relationships. Culture did not replace biology. It grew from it and was continuously shaped by the felt subjective experience of every individual within the group. Fun and kind of related, did you see the National Geographic cover piece about a fashion trend among a group of chimpanzees? No, that's crazy. Came out a few weeks back. The most revered chimp in the group stuck a blade of grass in one ear and wore it as a decorative piece. Within a few weeks, all the other apes did too. A few years back. How might we find that in like YouTube form? Chimpanzee fashion. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Let's do it.
Okay, from a message in a bottle to a message in an ear. We'll explain in a second.
Is this gonna be a worse? This is CBC News. I don't know if TDC is going to be any better. What about Culture Craze?
Asterisk isn't just a quirky pastime, it's a social experiment that challenges our understanding of primate culture. The grass, often mistaken for a
that could be AI. I don't trust that voice. All right, let's just run with this one. This is AI. Yeah. I would have started doing that.
Turns out that chimpanzees have their own way of sending social signals by setting fashion trends. Johanna Wagstaff is here, who among her many important titles is also our resident fashion trendsetter. I mean,
Debatable.
come on with the pink pants, right? Looking good. Joe, you know what I love about this story?
What?
Is just when
That's an
you're
aggression
sitting
of
on
some
your
sort.
high
She's got to get fired for that one.
horse, feeling
Can't just
very
point out
evolved.
someone's fashion
You
and
come across a story like
live.
this, and we're all the same, right down to our very beginnings, our chimpanzee cousins.
You couldn't have summed that up
Yeah.
any better. So yeah, fashion trends come and go. They're happening at
Oh, are we
warp
seeing it
speed.
right
Where
now?
Are we wearing our socks these days from cottagecore?
Oh, is that it?
I can't keep up. But Chris, have you ever considered wearing a blade of grass in your ear? I mean, it could be the next big thing.
Yeah,
It's
they're influencers,
They're
essentially.
influencers.
Right?
So this
Nice.
is what a group of chimpanzees started doing 10 years ago. Let me take you back 10 years to a sanctuary in Zambia where one female chimp named Julia started sticking a blade of grass in her ear. Then it evolved to dangling various objects out of her ear. And over time, there it is, so on trend, the rest of the group of chimps began doing
She must
the
have been
same
pretty
thing.
popular.
And this was actually studied. Fast forward to now, a different group at the same sanctuary, unrelated to these chimps, have started doing it again. With a twist, Chris. Now it's not just ear, it's also the backside. I'm less on board with this trend, but yes, the blade of grass.
Wait, was there any overlap? Like, was there any influence, or are they saying that two different groups arrived at the same fashion trend separately? Because now I'm wondering if there's just something about that environment that makes them want to put something in their ear.
in orifices is a thing that's happening in this group. And again, totally unrelated. Scientists also don't think they're doing to alleviate pain or to
I'm gathering the
scratch
two
an itch.
groups did it
They're
independently.
Just totally relaxed
Okay,
when
yeah.
they are doing
So then, is this even a fashion trend? There's got to be something else going on here, right?
this viral trend.
Yes. Pretty soon we'll see them branding it, selling it, in the
Hashtagging
corner.
it, all of
Yeah,
it.
exactly.
Yeah.
What does this tell us about our chimpanzee cousins?
Okay, so this is where it actually gets really fascinating because I think this suggests much deeper culture roots. I think up until now, scientists really thought that learned social behavior among animals really had to do with survival. So hunting for food or using to sharing.
So this is, I'm guessing this is going to be a very reductive explanation here, but fashion trends really have to do with survival. Yo, I'm Monkey Business. What's good? Welcome, welcome. Yeah, like there's no like fashion without survival. Like our underlying biology. Yo, thank you very much. Our underlying biology makes us care about these things because it helps us get, yeah. So I think that this would be a little reductive.
Access food or survival, but this is just sharing a trend. Now, scientists think that it may have started when a caregiver was maybe using cleaning tools for their ears, and that idea sort of stuck and continued down this viral trend. But it is really interesting that they just seem to be doing it when they're relaxed, no other motive behind it. So scientists are wondering, they're performing this study right now, so we'll have to stay tuned for the final results.
Interesting.
But they think it's just being accepted. And Chris, it's really interesting when they introduced new chimps into the group, the sooner they stick that blade of grass in their ear, the sooner they're accepted.
Wow.
I don't know what this says about us
Wow.
following trends.
Mean girls.
Totally, yeah. Next will be the pink jackets. Yeah.
Wow.
Well, yeah, that's another thing.
I
Survival-wise, you just getting ostracized because you're not following the group. I like to think chimps have an innate appreciation for aesthetics like we do, but I'm not a biologist. Right? That would be pretty cool. It would be cool if like there was one species that was just on a, like they weren't like intelligent in like a human way, but they were just on another level in like one aspect of like, I mean, I guess you could say like spiders the type of webs that they make, or obviously like I could look to like beaver dams, but like I'm thinking of like something that makes something that's absolutely beautiful and dynamic though. Like if there was an animal that made something that was different, or they had like a dynamic culture. But usually animals just, these are just extended phenotypes where they're just kind of making the same thing. So, all right, let's get back to it. Although our DNA is now relatively set, our understanding and thought are inherently dynamic, still evolving alongside cultural shifts. We can think about our language as a living system within the constraints of nature. As it develops, so too does our perception and understanding, allowing for increasingly complex concepts as the language itself grows. We can look back at this development as roughly progressive. Each generation is born into a language system that enables more sophisticated levels of thought, allowing abstract. So this is where it's like a rough progression. Enables more sophisticated levels of thought, allowing abstract ideas about morality, possibility, and intentionality to be internalized and passed on. Ultimately, humans today inhabit not just a physical world, but a shared conceptual landscape constructed and transmitted by language. The culture we inherit allows us to process reality in ways our ancestors could not have imagined, literally, and our own activity further contributes to its development. So yeah, this is where we really capitalize on we capitalize on what we just talked about, but this is where we really get to what I was trying to get to, which is how we arrive at like a shared understanding. Having established the co-evolved architecture that makes shared meaning possible, we can now explore the social dynamics that operate within this shared conceptual landscape. Our framework suggests a dynamic in which each individual's unique subjective experience, driven by their personal, internal, affective, neurological mechanisms, co-evolves through constant social interaction. I have a point to add here that concerns cerebral metabolism. Okay. What changes is the economy of human cognition, not the cognitive power? Is the economy of human cognition, not the cognitive power? I see. Right. I think that's kind of implied because we've talked about the free energy principle in this document. So I think it's implied that the trajectory of our learning is such that we are trying to reduce cognitive expenditure. The cognitive power itself is strictly governed. The human brain consumes that much of glucose. Most of that goes to heat, and only 6 watt remains for networking, calculation, and other operations. Wow. But yeah, that's a good example of homeostasis. That would have been great in the homeostasis video, that type of fact, because I think people don't understand all the different mechanisms that are operating in this homeostasis. The social environment presents a crucial and complex predictive landscape for the human brain. Our survival and well-being are deeply tied to our ability to successfully model and predict the actions, intentions, and beliefs of other people. As we have thoroughly reiterated, this predictive process is powered by a potent affective engine. When our actions and understandings align with the group's expectations and responses, we can experience the positive emotions of coherence, safety, and belonging. Conversely, when we violate a social norm or misunderstand an intention, we can experience negative emotions of shame, anxiety, confusion, or the pain of ostracism. This powerful affective feedback loop motivates the constant updating of individuals' internal models to better align with the group. So, yeah, just to point out, like at one level of abstraction, it's the feedback loop motivates the constant updating of internal models to better align with the group. But more close to home, it's to better handle expectation going into the future. And to go even further, it's to reduce the amount of cognitive processing that's required. All right, allow that. Interestingly, that's invariant across sexes and ages, except the youngest toddlers. Invariant. What are we saying with invariant? Never changing. Oh, nice. Okay. That is really interesting, actually. Yeah, that's just kind of set then. I'm wondering if is there any like variation that correlates with anything else that would be relevant? That would be an interesting thing. I don't know if it doesn't give us anything really practical, but all right, given that each person has a unique understanding that what is implicitly true for each of us is deeply subjective, personal, and different, the meaning we encounter in our everyday lives is inherently ambiguous. Oof. As we previously conceptualized, we infer meaning, and as we learn more from these interactions, we induce new meanings, continuously updating our own conceptual understanding. The act of communicating, therefore, is an attempt to construct a signal so effective that others will infer a meaning that is similar to the one we understand. This alignment occurs through the tangible physical interactions of communal life, through dialogue, corrective feedback, imitation, and simply observing the consequences of others' actions. We collaboratively refine and clarify meanings. Much of this happens unconsciously, as we are conditioned by the group and absorb the behaviors and implicit understandings of our community through a constant process of social learning. The most practical thing is that it bounds the physical limit of cognition, energy consumption being fundamental. Yep, that's definitely a key truth. Let's just say that I think lays foundation for a lot of what we talk about. So I want to change this wording, because I said over time this leads to not to identical interworlds, internal worlds. Inter is not a word. Over time this leads not to identical internal worlds, but to the emergence of pragmatically similar understandings. It wouldn't be practically similar understandings. I mean, it's practically similar when we're looking at it, but it's pragmatically similar in the sense that it's functionally sufficient for successful interaction by maintaining social coherence and avoiding the painful emotions of failure and misunderstanding. This is why we're not allowed to just make our own truth and then like still interact with the world. Because if we were to try to do that, we would get significant negative pushback. If I were to start, acting as if a dog is a bug and I try to swat at someone's dog, like I'm going to get in trouble. Something bad's going to happen to me, and it's going to feel terrible. Consider the concept of a chair. While each person associates this object with unique personal memories or sensations, we converge on a subset of practical inferences, such as understanding it as a thing to sit on, that forms the functional basis for shared meaning. This convergence arises organically as we act within a shared environment, connecting our personal meanings through practical and social contexts. So we all understand that this is a pen. That's what I would describe as like the pragmatically similar aspect of our understanding. Like we know that this thing can write. We can understand that this is a black pen. But we might have slightly different understandings of pens. As I said, maybe yesterday or a day or two ago, some people don't like pens. So when they see that I'm using a pen, they might think something like negative about me or negative about the pen. Some people like pencils more. These are just slight different aspects in people's experience. We can think about this state of pragmatic alignment as a social equilibrium. This equilibrium is not a static set of rules, but a dynamic state maintained by the affective mechanisms we have disclosed. It represents the set of subjective beliefs and behaviors that has, for now, survived the tests of both practical experience and social interaction by successfully minimizing painful prediction errors and maximizing the rewarding feeling of coherence. We can draw a powerful analogy between the development of shared meaning and biological evolution. The beliefs and meanings that survive and become stable parts of a culture are those that most successfully avoid the quote-unquote death of being invalidated by overwhelming practical failure or social scrutiny. Just as with biological evolution, we are not privy to how this process unfolds in the moment. It is only in retrospect that we can so this is something we can put a semicolon for. It is only in retrospect that we can speculate about why certain meanings, beliefs, and norms have evolved and stabilized as they have. Thank you very much. Welcome, Stark Vanilla. Welcome to the group. Thank you for the follow. All right. Feel free to lurk, or feel free to ask anything or say anything. This is a community for all. All right. Okay, so this is where we have a retrospective on truth. Oh man, we're jumping to the big stuff. This is where we really bluntly point out what this implies on our understanding of what truth might mean. Having explored the social dynamics that align our subjective worlds, we can now turn to the complex and multifaceted nature of truth as it emerges from this process. We can say that for each person, the most fundamental experienced truth is the implicit sense of what is real in the moment, the set of implicit beliefs and assumptions that are acted out and affectively felt with certainty. This is not a self-conscious philosophical category, but the very experience of a coherent reality, the felt sense that our model of the world reflects the truth. We considered how this subjective foundation gives rise to a social equilibrium, but we must be precise about what this implies. This equilibrium is not a single unified agreement that everyone holds. It is fragmented. An individual's understanding practically aligns with their family on some matters, their colleagues on others, and their broader culture on still others, suggesting that our sense of shared truth is context dependent. Furthermore, this alignment is based on pragmatically similar understandings, not identical internal states. This preserves the primacy of the individual's unique subjective world while explaining the functional reality of shared meaning. As we have discussed, our implicit understanding of what is true provides the standards of correctness that our predictive brain uses to generate expectations. We can conceptualize that our implicit understanding of what is true. I'm not trying to say that there's something that this is something that is objectively there, or this is an objective thing. We can conceptualize that our implicit understanding of what is true provides the standards of correctness that our predictive brain uses to generate expectations. This is when we were saying we can think that a cat is the concept of a cat is incompatible with the concept of a dog. Something can't be a cat and a dog at the same time. So that fact is what actually provides, the fact of this is a cat provides the rules of that it can't be a dog. The idea that the cat can't be a dog, we can think of as positively constituting what the cat is. But once again, we're just conceptualizing how we just tend to understand the world. So it's not like these relations are actually there in some external absolute sense. These relations are similarly contextual and contingent. Yo, Anio, welcome. Welcome. Yo, Daniel N, standatory and mandatory. Absolutely. Mandatory readings of the document. Heyo, welcome. Okay. I think we're up to date. Yeah, I really like this philosophy science bridge. So any topics are much appreciated. I love talking about this stuff. This reveals a crucial insight. Because our personal experience is always incomplete and the social equilibrium is constantly evolving, we are always in a state of relative ignorance regarding a theoretical full truth. Our understanding is, by necessity, always provisional and open to revision. Given this inherent uncertainty, The intuitive human response is a practical search for reliable authorities to ground our beliefs. We look to the direct feedback of the empirical world, the accumulated wisdom of elders or experts, and the stability of centralized authorities like texts and institutions. This social landscape is further complicated by the fact that people can lie or purposefully mislead, creating an even more complex predictive challenge for navigating whom and what to trust. Aligning our beliefs with a source we deem reliable provides a powerful feeling of safety and certainty, reducing the cognitive and emotional load of navigating a complex and often deceptive world on our own. This multifaceted reality suggests that truth is not a monolithic concept, but one that takes on different shapes depending on the nature of our inquiry. The standards we apply to the truth of a physical event are necessarily different from those we apply to the truth of a moral principle or the wisdom of a course of action. Yo, Chelsea, welcome. Shout out to IRL friends. We're reading through fun philosophy and science stuff. Sorry, I dipped to track down a citation for the 17-watt figure for cerebral metabolism. Nice. William B. Levy and Victoria G. Calvert. Communication consumes 35 times more energy than computation in the human cortex, but both costs are needed to predict synapse number. Wow. All right, I'm gonna just actually grab this. And I'm gonna just throw it in our necessary research section, and just kind of throw it in here as a potentially helping us explain what I just call it, the free energy principle. And I'll just leave that there and eventually get to it at some point. One message was okay. That was probably a spam message of some sort. All right, where are we at here? Humanity's great intellectual traditions can be seen as specialized systems, each developed in the pursuit of truth within varying domains. Unless anyone wants to, Energy Dompter. Unless anyone wants to pivot topics, I might just continue as we start getting into the very Jordan Peterson-esque stuff, where we start considering the trajectory of our. I have a pivot topic. All right, let's do it. Let's rip. Can you give your perspective on a paper? Sure. Also, Energy Dompter, thank you for being a representative and going out and sharing this community and getting that raid the other day. All right, what type of paper are we looking at? Yep, directed E to the 2i pi here in a raid Wednesday. Yep. Yeah. No, that's awesome. Much appreciated. Much appreciated. All right, so yeah, this next part goes through the trajectory of wisdom, basically pointing out why certain archetypes would have emerged from the development of culture. And the interesting thing is certain archetypes emerge cross cultures. So when different groups of people, different sides of the world, develop their own culture, we see patterns in each of these groups, and that points out that there might just be certain patterns that emerge whenever humans interact long enough in you know, in separation. So it's you could almost say that those archetypes are like a part of our DNA, which is kind of wild. So that's where you can argue that there's certain truths that are transcendent. Now, granted, all of this still has to abide by the type of truth we just discussed, which we pointed out that there wouldn't be some like objective transcendent truth. But that is a nice way we could think about what a transcendent truth might be when we're talking, especially when we're talking about morals, because that's a really important topic to consider, that there might be transcendent morals. I can't reach the site. It says it's offline. The site can't be reached. Refuse to connect. Which site are we thinking about? Oh, I see. Energy Dontor, you posted something. It's a paper related to... I did see it on my end. Let me... Oh my gosh. It's just a download. I don't... That's a little sus. Is there any online version of this? I mean, I'm sure you're not trying to get me, but I don't know if this is... I don't know if we should be having a... That's the version I could find. All right, what do we have here? It's a CR download file. Oh, it's because I have to say keep. However, it is Friday. All right. Just trying to see if there's a good way to like vet a PDF. All right, try to find like an online version of the PDF in the future, just so that so we could be careful. How bad would it? So I don't think we should read through this paper right now. How bad would it be if I just threw it into Gemini, as I am known to do? Oh, Daniel N. Is this the same? Let's see. Is that the same? That is the same. Awesome. Okay, we would have had to download it regardless, just so that we could throw it in. Okay, let me find this once again. All right, we should read the actual abstract, though, before we do this, so that we actually can... this paper, the paper, following a suggestion by Kripke, argues that there is an illuminating analogy between Wittgenstein's philosophy and Austrian economics, particularly that of Miles and Hayek. Most scholars interpret paragraph 608 of Wittgenstein's Zettel to suggest that language might arise out of physical chaos at the neural center. Since, however, Wittgenstein holds that the philosopher must not advance theories, he cannot consistently be advancing such theories in Z608. Rather, all the key concepts in Z608 must be cast in terms of Wittgenstein's forms of life. Thus, 608, read carefully, suggests that language arises not out of chaos in the brain, but out of the chaotic activities in human forms of life. What does that even mean? The paper shows that an analogous picture occurs in the early Austrian economists, such as Hayek, who is Wittgenstein's cousin, and Mises. 608 is part of a still unappreciated Austrian movement that emphasizes the creative chaos in human life. In this connection, the paper explains how 608 is an application of Wittgenstein's private language argument against a neural theory of a private language. Finally, the paper shows that the real argument in Z608 traces to early in Austrian phenomenology, shedding light both on Wittgenstein's philosophy and on Austrian economics. Okay. Onion is turning over in his grave right now. He loves Wittgenstein. I can't believe he's missing it. Yeah, let's do a Wittgenstein field trip. Is Z608 the index of one of Wittgenstein's lectures? Yes, I think that was the premise there. It was this paragraph 608 of Zettel, hereafter Z608. I don't know if that's Zettel. Is bro dead? Oh no. Yikes. All right, what should be in this let's make other people complicit in this AI usage. What should be in this prompt that I just give? Can you give us a thorough yet accessible assume we are I don't know how to pronounce or not, I don't know how to say Wittgenstein. Wittgenstein noobs. Wittgenstein and economic noobs. Thorough rundown of what this paper discusses, as well as its tangential topics, concepts. How can this be utilized on an intersubjective level when organizing political structures? I don't know if that's what we're concerned about. Well, he's not here, so I fear the worst. All right, well, I gotta actually find this now that you say that. We gotta find. Okay, here we go. Short.
If you want to be good at life, you need to be able to face the unknown and go for it. Like, that's the skill. The intolerance to uncertainty is the transdiagnostic factor that leads to mental illness, that leads to OCD, that leads to anxiety. Oh my God, I don't know if he likes me or he doesn't like me. Let me ask him. Let me ask his friends. Let me ask his mom. Let me ask him again. Let me ask him again. Let me ask him again. Let me ask. He said yes the first 6 times, but maybe he's thinking no today. I don't know what's going to happen. Is my professor going to like it, or are they not going to like it? Let me beg. Let me plead. Let me cry. Let me do this. Let me make sure that they like it. Professor, did you like it? Did you like it? Let me get my friend to read it. Let me get my mom to read it. Let me get the TA to read it. Let me get everyone to read it. Let me just do all this stuff. That is the.
So Daniel, and this is you with Onion right now. He's not here. He could be dead. Though I think you're actually. I think you're actually. You've got like a very chill vibe about this, where it's like, oh, Onion's not here. He could be dead. So it's not exactly the same. This is what I thought about.
Source of suffering. If you want to restart your life, you need to be able to tolerate the unknown. If you want to be.
Hell yeah. Stay hard. All right. Yeah, I don't know if we care about political structures. So I just don't think that's going to help us out asking that question. I can't live like that, man. That's too much anxiety. Not in the document, but it's Friday. Right, but we still want to make this practical and productive for us all. I like that. Jay, very stoic. Onion would have loved that. Onion would have loved that. That's great. Okay, it seems Zettel is a collection of unrelated works by Wittgenstein from 1929 through 1947, published as a book in 1967. Interesting. And when did Wittgenstein pass? 1951. Oh my gosh, I don't think I ever knew what this guy looked like. I always just thought that he looked like an old man. Okay, so this is pretty late. It's very famous among Wittgenstein students. How can the concepts be discussed? How can the concepts discussed in the paper be utilized to advocate for a resilient and free economy? And I just don't think that's like we just have to steer clear about. We have to certainly steer clear of political systems here, and I don't think the economic systems helps us out either. Yeah, it looks pretty ascetic. I gotta look up that one as well. Someone who practices rigorous self-denial and self-discipline. Wow, often for religious or spiritual reasons. By abstaining from physical pleasures and material comforts to achieve a higher spiritual or intellectual state. That's what I feel like all these linguistic philosophers are doing. They're just they're operating at another level. They're just floating above us all. There's a reference to ascetics in Elden Ring, I think. Really nice. The reason I believe the economic system is relevant is that when discussing personal growth, a related element of personal growth is economic resilience. Right, but that's it's just like a couple degrees of separation here. Like if we were to talk about economics, we would talk about, what is it called? Personal finance. We would talk about personal finance. We wouldn't talk about macroeconomics. And granted, you could argue that personal finance has some connection with macroeconomics, but really the most conservative advice to give someone with personal finance is very, like, it's almost decoupled from the macroeconomics. It's kind of like diversify and dollar cost average and stuff like that. It's never really, there's never really too much emphasis on the specifics, or there doesn't need to be emphasis on the specifics. Of course, you could consider what you should be diversifying in, but I'm not interested in politics at all, to be honest. But do you think the document doesn't point towards a certain political system, like it's totally agnostic? That's a good question. Part 1 does not point towards a political system at all. Part 2 doesn't point to a political system at all. And part 3, for the most part, won't point to a political system, except until the end, where I then make a case for a specific type of moral foundation. And this is going to be an epilogue. It's really just going to make a case for some sort of moral foundation that revolves around well-being and suffering. It's like I don't know how I'm going to write this yet, but it's just going to point out that, hey, like, perhaps we should consider how our actions affect other people's well-being and suffering and stuff like that. Just a very basic view of that stuff. So then you could try to connect that to politics, but the idea being, like, hey, do we know if some political move is going to affect the suffering or well-being of other people in the short term and long term? But this is where things get complex in political systems, because conservatism kind of has this thesis of, let's look at the long-term effects of what we're going to do here, right? We don't want to do things that might seem to have short-term gains and then long-term failures. And then the liberal side or the left side might point out, hey, like, the long term of staying stagnant is actually going to be bad as well. So we have to make these changes, or else we're all going to suffer for it. So, I don't think the document's actually going to be allowed to make any case towards a political system. But someone could interpret the document and then make a political argument. Like, it would have to require someone going from there. I'm not interested. Okay. Talking macroeconomics for personal reasons is like describing the ocean to a sailor. I mean, that one, the sailor might want to know more about the ocean, though. Onion Oven arrives. Oh, what is going on here? We've got a thought bubble. Did these connect? Not found. The second one was not found. Oh, this is all together. Okay, I see. Okay, these do connect. I think this guy is in the thought bubble of this guy. This guy is actually talking about this other guy. That's what's going on here. That's what we were doing when we were We were invoking your name, Onion Helmet, just so that you'd appear. Wittgenstein just came out, Onion Helmet. We were worried you'd miss it. He has risen. I fell asleep, so we thought you were dead. We were about to have a eulogy and everything. It was crazy. All right, I might just let this one run. We could always ask follow-up questions. It's no big deal. Yeah, let's let it rip. Developing central thesis, solidifying the core analogy. I'm now fully immersed in understanding the user's needs, specifically how to bridge the gap between Wittgenstein's complex ideas and someone unfamiliar with them, all while subtly including the paper's specific content. All right, here is a thorough yet accessible rundown of the paper you provided. Jake calmed me down, but I was frantically distressed. I was at peace listening to Stan of the Mana's voice. Nice. Hell yeah. That's what I'm here for. I'm trying to... this is an ASMR channel. Don't get that mixed up. It seems I was awakened by the name of Ludwig. Nice. All right, here's a thorough yet accessible rundown. This paper argues that there's a surprising and powerful analogy between the philosophy of Wittgenstein and the ideas of Austrian economics, specifically economists like Ludwig von... Is this Mises? Mises? Oh, man. Oh, Moses. Nice. All right, here we go.
We are looking at how to pronounce the name. It's said that as Ludwig von Mises.
Mises, okay. Mises and Hayek. The author, McDonough, oh no, I can't pronounce a single name, claims that both schools of thought are built on the same core idea, that complex, orderly systems, like language or a market economy, are not created by a central boss or planner. Instead, order spontaneously emerges from the creative chaos of everyday human activities. Okay, so that's very much in line to what we literally just read. But I'm sure we could get into the details here and see where there's differences. IPA. Oh, wow. Mises, nice. The weird quote that started it all. The entire paper hinges on understanding a single cryptic paragraph from Wittgenstein, known as Zettel 608. In it, Wittgenstein wonders about thinking and the brain. No supposition seems to me more natural than that there is no process in the brain correlated with thinking. Oh my gosh. I'm about to get stun locked for another month. So that it would be impossible to read off thought processes from brain processes. Why should this order not proceed, so to speak, out of chaos? Oh man. Okay, so now there's this weird thing where we have to consider how does social interactions affect the order that seems to arrive in different people's brains as neural activity does lead them to have these pragmatically similar understandings of the same whatever, of a pen, or of the same concept that is correlated with the stimuli of the word pen or whatever. Demonstrably untrue today. Neuroscience has disproven that assumption. Yeah, well, I mean, I would argue that, but it does seem like that, that isn't something that people are very much, or that it's not like something that everyone's on the same page about. Impossible to read off thought process from brain process. Yeah, we can start doing that, right? Like we don't have that at the level of sophistication that I think everyone wants yet, but we are starting to see patterns geometric patterns in the brain correlating with specific aspects of someone's conceptual experience. So the big one was maybe we can dig this up for fun. I didn't say this in the video. I just kind of put this down here as an example. The study found that the human brain, particularly the I can't do that one. Cortex uses a grid-like neural code to represent abstract conceptual relationships, similar to how it maps physical space. By having participants imagine transitions between birds that varied along 2 different dimensions, neck and leg length, they showed that brain activity patterns reflected a 6-fold symmetry characteristic of grid cells, suggesting that spatial coding principles also organize conceptual thought. This was 2016. Now this was more recent, but this is a preprint, so let's not even give it the light of day right now. And but people are looking at trying to find further correlations between specific conceptual thought and specific activity patterns, or patterns of activity. Did anyone else get sent that BlackRock training video? My slimes train me, BlackRock. I want 13 trillion in assets under management. What happened to Kappa? I don't know. Entorhinal? Yeah, I'm not sure. Or is it just entorhinal? Kappa von Kapperstein. I actually don't know the lore of that one. All right, so the common and wrong interpretation. Most scholars, the paper says, read this and think Wittgenstein is making a wild claim about neuroscience. Okay, that's us too. They call this the neurological interpretation, or NI. It assumes Wittgenstein is suggesting that, for all we know, our orderly thoughts are might literally arise from the physical, chaotic signals of the brain. Why the paper says this is wrong, the author argues that interpretation makes no sense. This interpretation makes no sense. Wittgenstein's entire philosophical method was to avoid advancing theories. He wasn't a neuroscientist. He was a philosopher who believed the answers to his questions were always before one's eyes, not hidden inside the skull. Okay, so then let's do the exercise of trying to figure out what the other way we could think about this is. No supposition seems to me more natural than that there is no process in the brain correlated with thinking. So I'm wondering, is he assaulting Hegel here? Like, Hegel's whole shtick is that there is this process of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. This is the process of experience itself. And yeah, of course, it goes forever. But Wittgenstein kicking Hegel. But this is what I'm guessing. I'm guessing that he's making a case that we can't find some like orderly mechanism, at least one that makes that much simple sense. But I could be wrong. That's the only thing I could think of when he's saying no process in the brain. Because the to assume that our thought is always like moving in the case where we find something wrong, like antithesis, and then we're making a subtle change and we're doing this over and over and over again, kind of assumes that our conceptual understanding is like continuous in some way, which is actually kind of right if we go back to our whole view of neuroscience as a continuous framework where not only is neural activity continuous, but also like the building of our memory is in some sense continuous, where you can imagine that our conceptual understanding is continuously moving in some direction. Don't tell Stan. I think we do assault Hegel in this very way as well. Like we instead of Hegel's process of experience, we use predictive processing to just point out that when things go wrong, like when expectations are not met, noticeably or unnoticeably, that triggers certain mechanisms in the brain, a release of neuromodulators that affect our learning and affect our attention in ways that are also either noticeable or unnoticeable. And yeah, this affects the trajectory of our understanding. So it makes sense that Hegel would have come up with that speculation as to what is actually happening under the hood. And it also makes sense because that process that is like what is really happening is so complex. It does make sense that you would want to say that no process correlates with thinking. But yeah, perhaps we've missed the mark. So what else could he mean here? So that it would be impossible to read off that processes, off thought processes from the brain, from brain processes. Why should this order not proceed, so to speak, out of chaos? Yeah, so I guess the issue is that when we're thinking about chaos, we're conceptualizing something. Like when was Wittgenstein? Do we still have him? No, we still have. Oh, can we just do Ludwig? No. Yes. 1951. All right. When would we have had an idea of determinism, physical determinism? When was the idea of physical determinism first? Actually, I'll say A, first posited. B, popularized within the scientific community, and then C, popularized broadly, more broadly. A, fifth and fourth. Okay, of course we're gonna get to ancient origins. Come on. Everything arises from the motions and collisions of atoms in the void, obeying necessity. The Stoics cracked as well. When the physical, popularized in the scientific community, 1600s. Descartes, mechanistic philosophy of the universe as a machine whose future follows necessarily from its current configuration. Wow, that's actually pretty cracked, though. Jago, you have to give Descartes that. You got to give him that one. That's pretty good. 1600s. Newton, of course. So yeah, I feel like, I don't know, Wittgenstein might have had the necessary tools here to consider that what we consider to be chaos, like what we see as chaos, is really down to the nitty gritty. I'm not giving Descartes shit. He's a fraud. Oh my gosh. He's going to be a changed man. Physical determinism goes back to Gilgamesh. Oh my gosh. Greeks, always the Greeks. Yeah, that's incredible. Absolutely cracked. Way before their time. Literally. Yeah, so just because we perceive things as chaos, and because it's beneficial to perceive things as chaos, that doesn't mean that it's actually chaotic in some sense. Of course, when we get to like quantum physics, then there are, I keep saying this, there are interpretations that view quantum physics as non-deterministic, and then there are, or at least there is an interpretation, the many worlds interpretation, which is in fact deterministic. So, yeah. All right. So I guess you could say from our perspective, from our subjective perspective, the world is chaotic in that quantum physics way, because even though there might be many worlds, we have no idea which world we're in, and we have no idea which world we're going to end up in as the world splits. You're going to need to respond to Spengler, bro. We can't keep going on like this. What did Spengler do? What was his? Do I have a beef? Do I have beef with Spengler right now? I love this, the prospect if we can't keep going on like this. By the way, did you watch that video on free will I linked in a while ago? Since it's Friday and free will is relevant for the document, can you react to it today? Perhaps. Can you remind me of the name of it? It's probably in my watch later. It's somewhere. Also, if you could just find the link, we could find it that way. He wrote a bunch of stuff, to be honest. Just wrote a Substack. Just write a Substack, easy. He wrote a bunch of stuff. Just write a Substack. Are you saying I should write a Substack? It's by Craig Biddle. Can we find this? Craig Biddle. It depends also how much time this is. Free will. Oh no, Alex O'Connor is everywhere. Free will, who has it? Is there a video involved here? Should we just read? It might be more fun than a video. Actually, this is kind of long. Oh, look at this. We're already there. So even this, I think we've. Okay, maybe we should start from the top. But I think we're. Those are just the implications of determinism. Okay, I'm probably gonna agree with what's going on here, except for. I don't know. Let's figure out where this goes, and then also it might be fun to take this whole thing, paste it into Gemini with the document, and see if Gemini can see any differences. Subscribe to the Substack, guys. Hell yeah. Is it too simple to say free will is the experience of making a decision? I think that's actually quite elegant. It's describing the contents of our experience, but I would say that we don't want to say is. We would want to say, like, the full thing is, we want to make this pragmatic. We want to say we can describe free will as the experience of making a decision. That's one way we can describe free will, because I think that's quite intuitive. But it's not like free will is something, like some definitive thing. It seems like the thing that people are looking for when they think about free will is this thing that appears or manifests in our conscious experience. This experience of us doing something, like the experience that I have of knowing that I can do certain things, and then I go and do it, and I saw that I just did that. Like, that's good enough for a practical conception or conceptualization of free will. Like, it's practical by definition, I guess. You can go most places you want in this area if you just redefine free will. This area. Right. Yeah, the point is we have to define it. We have to define it precisely. Like, there's no one free will that just has, like, so what we could do is we could explain what free will can't be, and determinism tells us what free will can't be in a sense. I point out that in another sense, our mindful observation that we don't control the thoughts that arise is another constraint on what we can say free will is. We don't have power over our thoughts in the moment. A video on free will with John Calvin in the title would get you a lot of views. Oh, do people care about John Calvin? Wasn't John Calvin a long time ago? The comments would be sick. Can you give me permission to link the video, or would you rather read this? I might rather read this, actually. I do. I'm different. Oh, what was that a response to? I forget what I said. Oh, do people think I'm different? Bro, don't even get me started. Oh, I thought Jago, I thought you were responding to that question. Do people care about John Calvin? I do. I'm different. Bro, don't even get me started. I have control of my thoughts in the moment. Oh my gosh. Now that's five head. That's what five head actually is. Okay. All right. We should give this more thought, and then we should continue. The paper's big idea. What chaos really means. The paper argues that when Wittgenstein mentioned chaos, he wasn't talking about the brain. He was talking about the messy, complex, and seemingly chaotic swarm of our everyday lives. This is why. So, when we're talking about concepts, we're talking about things that we can grasp, like things that are determinate. Like that's a word that Hegel and Brandom uses. Like the explicit meaning we understand is determinate, in the sense that there are bounds. That's like these relations of incompatibility and consequence, like literally determine the concept. So that's what they mean by determinate. So like, you know, this pen is bound by the relation that it is not a pencil, but it is a writing utensil. Like these are things that literally constitute what the concept is in some sense. So yeah, when we're talking about the seeming, right, the seemingly chaotic swarm of our everyday lives, this could be just our conceptual understanding, which seems chaotic, you know, from our point of view. It's just kind of changing chaotically. The center isn't the brain. The center of language isn't a neural. So this is a phenomenology, essentially. The center isn't the brain. The center is, there is no center. It's a, you know, this is what you know, someone like Sam Harris would say when doing mindful meditation. He would mention that there is no center of consciousness. You know, it's just, it's holistic. Me and Jago went for an IQ test. When he finished, the examiner looked in shock and immediately fainted. And he had to shit himself as well because the score was so high. Wow. Incredible. Eric, what's good? I'm getting here late, but I've seen Damasio say we have limited free will when discussing Sam Harris's view on a podcast. Wow. I didn't realize there was a overlap between Damasio and Sam Harris. But Sam Harris, yeah, he's got a book called Free Will, and he points out that we don't have free will in a physical sense. Like he doesn't go into the concept. Like I would say that Sam Harris's account of free will is not incredibly practical. It is he would argue it's practical. Like I could argue it's practical in many ways. Like we ought not think that we can, you know, have that type of control, and that actually does affect what we feel like we can do. But at the end of the day, you know, talking about the fact that we conceptualize ourselves as having this free will is actually much more practical. Oh no, what is that? What is this? Oh, Stan Richardson. Playwright, actor, astrologer, traveler. We got to do the astrology side. All right. Tell folks, remember and connect with their unique genius. Awesome. I practice astrology and its kindred arts, not as religion, but as startlingly effective methods for reimagining a more harmonious and even magical kind of living. So this is like where I think that there is benefits to leveraging these types of, let's just say, unscientifically founded spiritual frameworks. Like, I think this is the way to go about it. My primary teachers are that, and I'm a graduate there. My practice is heavily informed by an exploration of myth and psychology, human design and the gene keys, and animism and ancestral healing. So the only concern, though, is given that there's not a grounding in science, we just need to look out for whenever this type of thing can imply something that might actually hurt you. Like that's the real concern here. He's talking about libertarian free will. Right. Get this guy on the show. What show? We don't have a show yet. We'll get a show, but I don't know what it's gonna be yet. Get in touch. Oh my gosh, for questions or coaching. How funny would it be if Stan Richardson showed up You know what? We should at some point just like, I'm gonna bookmark this. We should just at some point just like message like, hey, like, I hope you don't mind. I'm not actually looking for coaching. I just saw that you had a similar name to mine and I appreciated it. So just hope you're doing well. Just send some love. Some love from the universe. Get him in the hot tub. Yep, we do have the hot tub show coming up in the next 3 years. Valid, one of the more successful early financial analysts on Wall Street, did so with tarot cards. Nice. Early versions of behavioral economics, some might say. Wow. It's very interesting. I do like tarot cards. Like, I like the idea of designing them and then... Yeah, I think there is something interesting about tarot readings as well, where a person has to, like, with a tarot card, which is, you know, explaining some archetype, to leverage that prompt with a certain person that they've just met or seen, and then, like, have to come up with some incredible speculation that might be more in line for some than others. Like, I imagine tarot readers at least feel like they are effective at their speculations, but yeah, I wouldn't trust that more than I would trust like a psychiatrist. Barnum statements usually. Barnum statements. What does Barnum mean? P.T. Barnum. Barnum effect. Individuals give high accuracy ratings to descriptions of their personality that supposedly are tailored specifically to them, yet which are in fact vague and general enough to apply to a broad range of people. Yeah, that's the other thing they could do. We just have to hope that they either aren't doing it nefariously or have convinced themselves that they're doing it beneficially, or in some beneficial way, but are not following, let's just say, the rules they ought to be following, whatever those might be. And maybe those rules are just simply empirical science, but you know, that's a whole other topic about norms and morals. Okay. The center isn't the brain. The center of language isn't a neural center, but the social center, the shared world of human activity. Okay, so I actually went in completely the opposite direction. I went a phenomenological route, but Wittgenstein is once again making this as like in the social sense. So this is still like an interpretive lens, just looking at the social world. The chaos isn't neural. The chaos is the great swarm of human actions, right? So once again, we actually just went over this like an hour ago, I think, where we can look at these things at different levels. Like when we're talking about culture, we can look at it at the level of the social group, but then we can go granular and look at what's really happening. And what's really happening is that each person is undergoing slight adjustments to their to what they understand. Like they're just learning things. They're being conditioned. And people are doing that in tandem and with each other. It's like they're negotiating meaning such that we arrive at pragmatically similar understandings. So, yeah. And if we were to go even deeper, we would see things actually happening in the brain. So while this is a interpretive layer of abstraction we can take, it's not the only one. And it's not enough to make a claim like the center isn't in the brain. Like we would say that this is like an inappropriate statement to make, given that we can conceptualize multiple different centers. We can say that one way we can think about the center is in the social environment, or it is the social center. But another way we could say that the center is the brain. You know, we can do that. Why can't meaningful, orderly language arise, so to speak, from the chaotic, uncoordinated mess of all our social activities and forms of life? All right, the aha moment. This is where the analogy clicks. The paper argues that this exact picture, order emerging from social chaos, is the central idea of Austrian economics. Okay, so we probably don't need to go farther on this because now it's just going to bridge the analogy together. Orderly prices arise spontaneously from the chaos of human market activities, right? That's some sort of negotiation, even though people aren't aware of it. And same with this. This is some sort of negotiation, but people aren't aware of it. Tangential concepts. Okay, we probably don't need to go too far into this. So what's the point? The paper concludes that both Wittgenstein's philosophy and Austrian economics are often misunderstood by the mainstream because they share a unique and radical Austrian paradigm. This paradigm insists that the most important things about us are not hidden in some private center. They're always before one's eyes in the creative chaos of human activities that make up our lives. Yeah, I mean, fair enough. That's just like saying, hey, like we can see an interpretation that makes sense to us, that is intuitive. Macroeconomics was solved by Keynes. Easy. I'm not aware of Keynes. Okay, let's have some fun now with free will here. So this is what I was concerned about. Free will is not the ability to fully control which thoughts or memories arise from your subconscious, nor is it the ability to act in ways you don't want to act, or to act on a weaker rather than a stronger desire. Nor is free will a violation of the law of causality, properly understood. So this is all shared, that we make the same cases in the document. But then here is where I think there might be a problem. What then is free will? It is the choice to think or not to think, to exert mental effort or not to do so. So I think we go like a little... I think we try to go a little deeper than this, where it's like, what's really happening is that we just find ourselves with this conceptual understanding that like we are a person, that we can do something. So then what does it mean to like... So we, instead of think, we say reflect. What does it mean for us to reflect? Like in the moment, like this is the main thing that we can do. We can reflect on something right now, and it's like, in some sense, it's leveraging that concept, but at the same time, we're just, we are in a deterministic way, like just leveraging that habitual concept and doing something. So, yeah, I think that's as low as we can get without getting like really confusing. So this is actually quite akin to what we talk about. That you can do, that you can and do make this choice is introspectively self-evident, right? But what's more effective is that you can conceptualize yourself making this choice. Like once we now have this idea that what we can do is to reflect on what we can do, like that's a huge increase in power here. If free will is hot dogs, when did you guys have last have free will? Oh, that's a great question. It was over the summer. I think it was in August. I think that was the last time I had free will. If free will is hot dogs. What do we have? Proof physicalism is false. The doctors said they've never seen a body kill the coronavirus, like my body. They tested my DNA, and it wasn't DNA. It was USA. That's fair point. If that were to be the case, then yeah, that would assault what we know about biology. Yeah. So the other thing, Onion Helmet, that I mentioned earlier is, so I want to have a retrospective on consciousness on Monday. And really, I think we have to point out that my position on this matter is actually not physicalist. It's neither idealist nor physicalist. So we have to point out that these labels carry too much weight. I think that the physical, that our understanding of the physical world implies that physicalism is false. Like that's the type of argument that I need to make. All right. Daniel N. Deep. The deeper question is the impetus to change what we're thinking about free or predetermined? The impetus. That's like just the thing that causes it, like the catalyst, I'm guessing. Impetus. The force or energy, something that makes a process. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean, it would be. I mean, a predetermined is not the way that I would describe this, but it would be. Even though I don't say predetermined, I do say predisposed. Like like that is predisposed in some sense, and it's, you know, from our point of view, it's often random, like when we're mindfully meditating and random thoughts just start appearing, like it's yeah, there's not too much order that we can make sense of it. A lot of times, for me at least, the thoughts seem to be things that I should do or should be doing, things that I should do right after I'm done. So in that sense, I can make sense of why my brain would be doing that. But yeah, the real power, the point that we try to make in the document, is that we can do things now, we can think about things now that will affect that impetus. So in some sense, if we were to think about predetermining, that's something we can do right now. We can predetermine the chance that we think about something in the future, or we do something in the future. That's like the whole power we have right now. It's like if I were to think about something I should do before I go to bed tonight, and I should think about this thing when I walk into my bedroom. So I'm going to imagine my bedroom, and so now when I walk into my bedroom, it's more likely that thought will pop into my head because I've just kind of set that thing into motion right now. Okay, would it be fair to say that my understanding of Wittgenstein's notion of meaning as arising from use in social contexts is true at a certain level of abstraction? However, the specifics of how social norms influence our understanding are more developed by Brandam's deontic ethics. Oh, that's a good question here. Well, Brandam's all about the social setting as well. I'm not sure where there's the difference here. I think Brandam would agree that even his own thing is that meaning arises from. It's not like a meaning arises from use. It's that the development of meaning. So not only would meaning arise from use in social context, but its development, its movement would occur in social contexts. Like Brandam doesn't talk about neuroscience at all. Brandam's also at the level of social norms, social what was it? It's attitudes and I forget the other one. Statuses and attitudes. It's different people's. We can't go deep into that, or else we'll get more complicated. But yeah, it's all social encounters and interactions for Brandam. Brandam's deontic ethics. Yeah, so the deontic ethics though connects the contents of our experience, like the concepts themselves, with the practices, with the social practice. So when I talk about the normative aspect, I kind of talk about it in a way, like in a more phenomenological way, where we can think about these things as normative. For Brandam, they're normative because they play out as rules in a social setting. So this is where I'm taking the language and what I believe to be the implications, but I'm not taking what Brandam's actually saying. That's why this man has a 91% approval rating among Republicans. It was USA, yes, King. Sam Richardson has a 100% approval rating in this chat. We've never seen anything like it. Well, yeah, I guess you don't see all the people that come in here and then disapprove and leave. The emotional origin of an act, predetermined in the Cartesian sense of proceeding mechanically from an initial state. Right. Okay. Yep. So I would, yeah. I know that I touched upon this like 10 minutes ago now, but yeah, I would say then, yeah, that word does match. Sure, like a post-it note on the fridge that is consciously predetermined, right? I could not even get close to doing a Trump voice. All right, what are we doing here? We have to, the word introspection derives. Oh, that you can, okay, so introspect is the word that we use for reflect. That you can and do make this choice is introspectively self-evident. When you introspect, when you look inward at the functions of your consciousness, you can watch yourself choosing to focus your mind fully or less than fully. You can observe that you are able to choose to increase or decrease mental effort. The word introspection derives from the Latin spicere, meaning to look or to observe, and evidence derives from the Latin videre, meaning to see. When you look inward and observe yourself choosing to activate your mind, you are observing evidence of the fact that you can choose to activate your mind. This is great. This is wonderful. The process of looking inward and observing yourself choosing to think is as valid as the process of looking outward and observing a traffic light turning green. It is direct evidence, right? So direct evidence in the sense of it's like fundamentally empirical in an experiential sense. You know, like this is direct evidence that this is a pen, even though at the end of the day, that truth is felt. Like you know, all my thoughts are speculative, most fundamentally, but we're talking about, you know, a layer of abstraction slightly above that, where when you see something and you know it to be an object, you know, that could be direct evidence in this case. If someone claims that your introspective evidence of your choice is choice to think is invalid, the burden is on him to provide evidence that what you observe yourself doing is not what you observe yourself doing. To fully grasp the nature of free will, we must understand the relationship between free will and reason. Beautiful. Reason is the faculty that operates by means of perceptual observation, conceptual integration, and logic, non-contradictory identification. Using reason, we can perceive the outside world with our senses and the functions of our mind through introspection. We can integrate our perceptions into concepts, propositions, generalizations, and principles. And we can check our ideas for contradictions and correct them along the way. In short, reason is the faculty that enables us to think. Whereas reason is our capacity to think, free will, our volition, is our ability to activate that capacity. So my concern is that we're being a little too like strong on the language of this is this thing and this is this thing. That can get you into trouble. But yeah, like this is one way we can describe reason. This is one way we can describe free will. We can describe these things in many different ways. We can make many different types of connections between these concepts. Did your Reddit post cause mass unrest? Did my Reddit post? Are you talking about the one that we looked at yesterday? Can we find it? Can we get this bad boy? This guy?
Let's build a
No, that's the actual thing. This guy. Are you asking if this is, you know what, this is kind of crazy. This is kind of so we got 86-5, so I would say a little bit of unrest. I don't know if there's anything new though. 58 minutes ago. 9 hours ago. What was the response here? Okay, so, and I have a few points. And then someone says, some problems with this response. Panpsychists love to pose their position absent some pretty big caveats. They cannot define their explanandum I don't know what that word means. Another term for explicanda. What? Oh no. The fact, thing, or expression which is to be explained. Okay. Why not explanation? They cannot explain. I don't know. Maybe there's some meaning that I'm not gathering from that. So they cannot limit or localize the phenomena, call a bug a feature, and boom, philosophical career made. Jeez. The physicalist has ceteris paribus as her big club. All things being equal, we should assume consciousness is a localized phenomena. All things being equal, we assume that it's a natural product like everything else. This places the burden squarely in the panpsychist's lap. They have to rely on paradoxical interpretations of experience to get irreducibility. The irreducibility to get them physical fundamentality. They need magic. I think the argument, though, is... Alright, so what is this referring to? Oh, with all considered the things made... Oh, I see. All things being equal as her big club. Right, so the question is why? So if I'm gonna take the panpsychist side here, why should we assume consciousness is a localized phenomena? Why should we assume that it's a natural product like everything else? Like at some point we have to acknowledge science. We have to and we can't just acknowledge it like in an analytic idealist way. Like we can't say that like, hey, we understand that science is there and has rules, but our experience of it kind of creates those rules. Because then the rules contradict what like our fundamental axiom. That's a real problem. But we can get on to all this stuff on Monday. We don't want to have another consciousness discussion right now. You like pragmatism? John Dewey's paper on the reflex arc is a beautiful outlook on this, and it's one of the great works of pragmatism. John Dewey's paper on the reflex arc. Where do I want to put this? Necessary research. Should we put it in the linguistics section here? Let's do that. Yeah. I'm a pragmatist. I think that's what. Even in the consciousness discussion, like I was a normative pragmatist. I think that's what like if you like listen to all the points I made, that's the takeaway that you'd come away with. You wouldn't say that I was a physicalist or an idealist. It would be that I'm a normative pragmatist. Like we're not trying to define what is in some like fundamental sense. It's all about how we speak about these things. What we're allowed to say, what we want to push, and why. Reasoning is a huge deal. I'm reminded of it by the shifting attention from traffic lights to inner thoughts. Nice. Has the philosopher Ayn Rand observed... Oh, we got to get back to it. There it is. Okay. Is free will one of the few philosophical subject matters where you and Ayn Rand agree? I don't know. We'll see. Riotous. Redefine free will too. Akin to a definiens and definienda. Yeah, callback. Seems to be common with these non-PhD philosophers. A classic. I mean, so far I'm stoked by the author here, so we'll see. We'll see where this goes. Seen this way, reason and volition are two sides of the same faculty, whereas reason enables us to think, free will is the choice to think. Okay. So I'm really curious once we throw this into Gemini what it says in terms of comparing and contrasting this with the document. As the philosopher Ayn Rand observed, man is a being of volitional consciousness. Reason does not work automatically. Thinking is not a mechanical process. The connections of logic are not made by instinct. So all of these things I would disagree with. The function of your stomach, lungs, or your heart is automatic. The function of your mind is not. I disagree completely. That was the whole point of the somatic. Oh my gosh, we got to get back into it. The somatic marker hypothesis. Somatic marker hypothesis. This is what it's all about. For example, let's go 170 here. Damasio's somatic marker hypothesis explains how the brain uses these felt states to guide our choices. When faced with a decision, our brain rapidly simulates potential outcomes and generates an associated visceral bodily feeling for each one. A positive feeling of ease pushes us towards a decision. This goes back to valence, positive valence. A negative feeling of unease or alarm pushes us away. This is the neurobiological basis for our gut instincts, revealing how even our most logical decisions are profoundly shaped by the body's wisdom in predicting future states of well-being. This fundamentally challenges the classic intuitive view of a conflict between reason and emotion. The idea that we can make purely logical decisions separate from the messy influence of our feelings is a deeply ingrained but neurobiologically unfounded myth. In this embodied view, our feelings aren't a bug in the system. This is like the important part because, it's not like I'm trying to assault logic. In this embodied view, our feelings aren't a bug in the system. They're an essential feature that makes effective reasoning possible in the first place. So that would mean that, so the function of our stomach literally is connected with the functions of our mind. And reason does work automatically. This is the whole thing I'm trying to push. Like, what we feel to be reasonable in any moment is not like dependent on some objective standard of reasoning. It's just whatever reasoning that we've like internalized or whatever we think is reasonable as it's manifesting in our experience right now. That's why it's important to study logical reasoning, because that will affect whether or not we find something to be logically reasonable or reasonable and logical at some later date. Like that's one of those other ways we can we can do something now to affect what happens in the future. So at any moment, we're just like predisposed to think that something's logical or not based on our current understanding or current brain state, etc. I like that. Yep. Valence. Yep. Of the description of settling on a choice, right? A highlight for me in the document so far. There is more wisdom in your body than in your deepest philosophy. Who said that? That's similar to the Hank Green video we watched, the one on aliens, where he says there's more unexplained phenomena in your colon than there is. I forget what he said. Then there are aliens? I forget what he said. Even balance among the wisest of bodily wisdoms. Nietzsche, wow. All right, so yeah, I'm not sure where the author's going in this regard. At any waking moment, a person can focus his mind to a full, active, purposefully directed awareness of reality, or he can unfocus it and let himself drift in a semi-conscious daze, merely reacting to any chance stimulus of the immediate moment. A person can even actively turn his mind against its proper function. He can deliberately try to push out of his awareness relevant facts that he does not want to face. In a word, he can evade. Yeah, so I think the issue here is that the moment that you stop reflecting, your brain and your body go on autopilot. And that's not to say that you feel like, what you're doing when you're not being self-conscious or self-consciously reflecting on what, that you're actually focusing and reflecting on what you're doing. That isn't to say that doesn't feel like something that you intend to do, but it might be something that it's not exactly something you intend to do. The point of this is like intention is both set and retrospectively felt in the moment. Like you can consider whether or not what you had just done was something that was intentional, but chances are what you had just done is not the same exact thing as what you had felt in that moment of what you were trying to intend to do. This is something that Brandon points out. Like intention, deed, and he talks about, actually we actually do this in the document. We should just go over our free will stuff in the document. Actually, before we do that, let's just let's throw all this stuff into a Gemini chat and see what happens. So I'm just gonna do one of these. I don't know if this is highly inappropriate, but let's just do it anyway. Implications of free will. In sum, because free will is real, so we're not going to say that. We can't say that free will is real. That's a very odd. That's an ambiguous statement to make. People are going to infer different things from that. How do we get it all? Someone builds a business. Yep. Jesus, we've got some strong language in here too. Things used correctly. Is that the last thing? Nice. Okay, and then let's throw in our document here. And let's say let's just put it at the top. Can you compare and contrast the meaningful takeaways / implications, actually the meaningful tenets / implications of regarding free will between the document attached and the following quoted article. The fact that we can do this is just insane. Absolutely bonkers. All right. Balance anthropomorphized. What should I do about this sensation of gravity? Almost always makes the best choice, no matter the species. Right? And instantaneously too. Can Gemini not go to links and read? Seems like you had to download the earlier PDF as well. Pretty sure ChatGPT can just read off URLs. It might be able to. Yeah. That would be nice. But this is just to ensure that it gets it. Like a file is pretty easy to just throw in there. Here's a comparison and contrast of the tenets and implications of free will as presented in the Stan Richardson document and the provided article. The most fundamental difference is that the article argues for a libertarian view of free will, where freedom is a primary self-caused choice that stands outside of and directs your thoughts and desires. In contrast, the Stan Richardson document argues for a compatibilist view of free will, where freedom is an emergent felt capacity that arises from a deterministic material brain. Okay, so maybe because I zoomed ahead, maybe we got a wrong view of the what came prior to that. Uh-oh. Got a Sam Harris. This is probably... Oh, it was here. If determinism is true, there is no should or even could about what you do. So, yeah, this is missing the mark. All right. Core definition of free will, the article, libertarian. Free will is defined as the primary choice to think or not to think. This is a volitional, self-initiated act. The you, the entity, the thinker, is the primary cause of this choice. which then governs all other secondary choices. The document, Compatibilist. Free will is not a single choice, but an emergent capacity and a process. It is defined as the capacity to participate within and ultimately influence the very framework of constraints that makes meaningful action intelligible and possible. Freedom is explicitly identified as the process. So this is the argument I kind of make, where if we're going to talk about having freedom, like the fact that I have freedom carries rules about what that means I need to do. So because the moment after I reflect in the moment on what I can do going forward, things are just going to now transpire in such a way where I'm not reflecting on it and I'm not aware of what's happening. Things, a lot of what I understand is changing without me noticing. What I end up doing might not be what I set out to do. So the point is, we can periodically or just over time we can reflect again on whether or not what you're doing is what you set out to do. But not only that, it's that in order to feel free, you have to do that. Like that's the whole point of the norms of freedom itself. It's like there's something that I have to do in order to feel like I'm actually free, and it requires that I check up on whether or not I'm doing what I set out to do, knowing full well that my understanding and what I feel like what I'm doing is constantly changing. So I need to make sure that I'm not just setting myself in a direction and then leaving it be. Like I can't just this goes, an intuitive way to make this connection is like people who purposely don't reflect on some aspect of their life, and you might say that they don't have control over that because they aren't taking the time and the effort, because some of this stuff is effortful, to actually deal with what might be the truth. And so this is, obviously an issue when it comes to what you feel like you're doing, but also with what you feel like is true. And that's like the same question. It's, you could think about your freedom as simply facts about the world and yourself. So yeah, you kind of, so that's the thing. You have to kind of earn the freedom. You have to earn, not only do you have to earn what you understand about your own freedom. Like I am the type of person that, before I started streaming, I didn't know for sure if I was the type of person that could stream. And so I had to do it. I had to convince myself that I was the type of person that could stream. And that was at the beginning, those first few days, that was anxiety inducing. And over time it became less anxiety inducing, but it was a thing where I had to convince myself. I had to earn the ability to think that I had that freedom, that I was able to do it. So I don't know if that made this a lot more complicated, but in the document, I think I explain it more thoroughly and straightforward. Where do we start here? The reason I believe in libertarian free will is because I believe the ability to consciously reflect on and make decisions is self-evident as a form of agent causality. I believe if you understand agent causality, you'd understand free will. I do feel like, so I do agree that it does seem quite self-evident that we have this capacity. But just given everything that we discussed, we can't, this is same with the consciousness thing. We can't just take some intuition and set it as truth in some objective sense. We have to take a more a pragmatic perspective where we look at all the other things at play here. What's actually happening? What's actually allowing you to have this experience right now? And what's actually happening when you're not oh man, we lost are we back? No, it's worse. Oh, that's terrible. Should I just be a blurry man? blurry face. Get some 21 Pilots in here. I don't know if this is how you're supposed to do it. I don't know. All right. Do you think you have the ability to have done otherwise? Yes. Interesting. How do you deal with the common objection of you don't choose your thoughts? Right. To that end, I've found that having extreme overconfidence going into a task and then looking to try and complete it has helped me a lot with career stuff, school stuff. Yeah, I think that's a great tool. I absolutely can do it because I'm cracked. Yeah, it's like the fake it till you make it. Like there's a real aspect of that wisdom where, yeah, you kind of have to believe that you can do it in order to try it in some sense. Like you have to trick your body and your mind into at least providing the motivation to actually get it done. Can you ask ChatGPT what is agent causality? I can. Can you briefly explain agent causality? Is the view in philosophy that persons themselves, agents, can originate causal chains, not just events? Okay, when we say causal chains, are we talking about in the physical world, or are we talking about in our understanding? Because this is where we run into errors. So certainly we can conceptualize that when we like think that we want to do something and then we do it, we are like setting things in motion in the physical world. I wonder if I could just actually just remove the source and bring it back. Let me try that. Look at that. Genius. Turn it off, turn it back on. That's how you know I'm a computer scientist. All right. Yeah, so most causal chains treat events as causing other events. Most causal explanations. A match striking causes an ignition. Once again, these are interpretations. This is us retrospectively interpreting what has just happened, or this is just us interpreting what happens. It's at a level of abstraction here, Agent causal theorists argue that when a person acts freely, the agent is the fundamental cause, not any prior event, belief, or desire. Yes, the thing to point out is that we can't just look at the event of I picked up this pen. We have to look at the chain of events that occurred within my brain that affected my muscles, that when, like if we were to go deep down, like that's really what's happening. I only just interpret this as it being me picking up this. So from my view, it might seem like I caused those events. And from that level of abstraction, that's true. But that doesn't give us the ability to say like that is the right way of interpreting what just happened. So this is why it says freedom is explicitly identified as the process of realignment. So this is where we have to reflect on whether or not we're still we have to realign with what we want to have done, which might even be to have that freedom. It's like, imagine someone that's got an addiction and they feel like they have freedom over their life, and then perhaps they can enjoy that freedom when they think, oh, I can think right now that I'm going to get better. But then once they let themselves go into autopilot, the addiction takes hold. It does that. So they have to reflect again and say, hey, did I actually have that freedom that I thought I had? Like, they could just think, oh, I have that freedom because I could think it right now. But you have to actually reflect on whether or not you had earned the freedom. Like, are you allowed to think that you have that freedom anymore, given that what you're doing is falling into into what you don't actually want to be doing, at least in this moment, or what you think now in this moment you don't want to be doing, after this moment. Freedom is explicitly identified as the stance on determinism and causality. The article rejects determinism. The article directly refutes determinism. It rejects event causality, the idea that events are caused by prior events, as fundamentally flawed. Instead, it posits entity causality. Entities act according to their nature, and a human's nature is to have reason that operates by choice. All right, so we're getting into trouble when we're like creating these ambiguous statements. But therefore, you are the cause of the choice. The document accepts determinism. The document fully accepts a materialist and deterministic foundation. It agrees with the determinist premise that we cannot violate physical causality, and explicitly precludes a magical concept of free will that exists outside of biology. Freedom, in this view, must be compatible with and even emerges from these deterministic processes. Okay. The self and its relationship to thoughts. The article, the self is a thinker. The article argues for a distinct self or thinker that is the entity making the choice. It states thinking can't happen without a thinker. That's false. We know this to be the case from our consciousness studies. We know that thinking, depending on what you mean by thinking, right? Like you can't just define thinking as being able to think about yourself as a thinker, because now you've just kind of like created a loop where you can't ever, you've defined the thing that you're putting out. But thinking probably more closely correlates with the type of consciousness that non-self-conscious animals have. So thinking can certainly happen without a thinker, right? Without the thinker from that thinker's point of view, right? Or from that from that conscious animal's point of view. But I get what it's saying. Like, we are conceptualizing something that can think in either the self-conscious or the conscious way as a thinker. But really, I think what the author needs to what the author needs to hold is that the person who's actually thinking of the thinker, must have that. That still implies you're limited by which thoughts appear to you. The two seem isomorphic. The same event can be described both ways equivalently. Event A causes event B, agent causes event A, and transitively caused B as a consequence. The dog who dreams. Do you believe in agent causality? Is that what we just went over? Agent causality? Is that... Oh. Was that this? Yeah, it depends what we mean by like causality here. Like when I say that this can make sense as a way to describe events, like I'm merely just saying that. Like I'm not saying that there's some causal thing in the universe that affects that's touching on the objective truth of causality itself. I think when we're talking about causality, it's most appropriate to talk about causality in the physical world. And therefore, I would not privilege this discussion over one that talks about the determinism at the physical level. Yes, I can empathize with and understand the idea that, my intention to lift this pen actually affected my arm, and that affected the velocity of this pen for some moment. But I wouldn't privilege that. Like, I wouldn't privilege my view of this over the view that I feel like abides by the standards of science. It always goes down to the standards of science. Why ought we? That's why it's really powerful to have this like normative, pragmatic stance. because it all comes down to why we ought to be using certain concepts instead of others in certain contexts. The Dog Who Dreams. To my understanding, agent causality is an idea Aristotle had, which is the idea that in an object there exists causal potentiality, and in humans, multiple causal potentialities exist with regards to our actions, and that's what free will is. Okay, to me this is ambiguous, but I'll just let's entertain this. It's important to sort out Aristotle's own doctrine from the modern agent causation theory, which is a 20th century term. What Aristotle actually said, he does have a theory that looks similar. Causal powers. For Aristotle, natural objects, including humans, have built-in potentialities. So this is like something that, allows us to jump to Heidegger again. Like when we're talking about objects having potential, when we're talking about being, right? Like this is like we're talking about the meaning of the object, what it potentially could be, and whatnot. The whole idea of being in time is that we cannot talk about an object's being without considering the thing, the medium, the person that can think about being itself. So in this case, we have to consider the subjective view of the thing, and not just like the lowercase b being of this is a pen, but like all the feelings that come with it. So potentiality, for me, is most close to like the idea of predictive processing, where our brain is just built to predict aspects about the world and about this pen, etc. And Heidegger allows us to see how this is. It's not like we're just predicting things about the future. We're predicting things about the now, like what currently is the case, and we're also predicting things about the past, like what was the case. It's the whole idea is that the predictions are affecting our interpretation or our retrospective perspective in this moment, and that's always changing, like as our understanding is changing. So this is why we're always faced towards the future we're always towards potential, because even our understanding of the past is constantly changing. Even our understanding of the present is constantly changing, and obviously our understanding of the future is constantly changing. Like another thing to point out is that like our understanding of what our own freedom is changes over time, and that's difficult to grapple with. It's not like everyone has the same sense of freedom. We point this out many times in the document where, someone that is handicapped might not think that they're able to go to the other room. Like that's not something they could freely do right now. Whereas someone, for me, it's not even an issue that I can just like walk to the other room. And this affects what we feel in our experience as we consider what we can do. And it's not like a logical thing. It's not like the person that's handicapped thinks, oh, I don't have this, therefore I can't do that. It's just the potential of going into that room doesn't even arise for them. A physical freedom is not a legal freedom, is not an ethical freedom. Who said that one? But yeah, I mean, that's a good, the point is right where it's like, or the point, me, nice, hell yeah. The point is apt where, yeah, when we're talking about freedom, there's different contexts and yeah, there's not like that's why free will is so ambiguous. Like the type of free will that we try to push in our document is one in which each person has a unique relationship to the very concept of freedom itself. What is required for me to be free? And what am I able to do? and that's a relationship each person must go through. It's a practice, right? Like that's the whole point. Freedom is not something that you just have at one. It's something that you have to engage in. Humans have multiple potentialities for action. So yeah, the point, another point is that like when we consider the potential things that we can do, we've already fallen. We've already reduced the full potential to concrete things. This is like the sense of the idea that whenever we think about ourself as a self, we've already objectified ourselves, and therefore we've already lost our full authentic self, you know. Okay. And this is another one where like these early philosophers, and I say early, but people like today still think this, they think that rationality is some external thing that you either have or you don't. You're either following or you're not. But rationality is most fundamentally a feeling that you have as you traverse reasons in your mind. And so you might feel like that what you're thinking is rational because it abides by things that you've seen as rational or tenets of rationality that you just understand, that you've internalized. As you change, so will what you believe to be rational. If you say potentiality is real or exists, you may run into an actual infinity issue. Right. It's, once again, like we have to be like we have to follow like the standards of normative pragmatism, like the linguistic standards of normative pragmatism. When we're talking about potentiality, this is a way that we can make sense of something we experience. It's not that potentiality exists. Now, granted, when Heidegger's doing his thing, like he points, this is the whole point I make in the video. He's pointing out that his own phenomenology is interpretive. Like so he's implicitly saying that this is a way we can think about all these things. You know, it's not like you know, being in the world is like some external absolute concept that makes sense for, or that always applies to experience. I mean, a property of that characteristic is that it always applies to experience, but it's not like that is some God-given property. Similarly, potentiality, being towards potentiality, is not some God-given property. It's just a very effective way that we can make sense of our experience. And yeah, so it's not like we don't run into an actual infinity issue because we're not actually dying on some ontological hill. That's the whole point of this entire document. We actually assessing our own framework. This is a fun read that we could do right now. It's Friday night, so let's get a little crazy out here. Assessing our own framework. Our exploration of how collective knowledge emerges is now complete. We have traced a long and complex story, beginning with the deep evolutionary origins of subjective experience and following the process by which shared meaning is forged through social dynamics. So that's what we read earlier today. What we would have read is this. From that foundation, we examine the development of the integrated narrative tradition of wisdom and the subsequent differentiation of the specialized empirical method of science. Finally, we considered how these can be integrated and practically employed through our practice of freedom to form a more reliable and meaningful understanding of the world. Having made this journey, we can now look back at how the framework of experience, understanding, and freedom we've developed fits in this trajectory of collective knowledge. To be consistent with our own arguments, we can now apply the same analytical lens to this very document to clarify the nature of our own framework and justify its use as a practical tool. All right, let me read chat here real quick before we continue. Sorry, didn't mean to be prosaic. I need to expand my vocabulary. Having style or diction of prose, lacking poetic beauty. No, I thought it had poetic beauty. So would you say the ability to have done otherwise, libertarian free will, is an extension of our ability to reflect? Is this a question to me, or is this a question to Energy Dompter? Because I think I'm assaulting libertarian free will here. Isn't would you say the ability to have done otherwise? Okay, this is probably a question to me, leveraging libertarian free will. The ability to have done otherwise is an extension of our ability to reflect on the potentiality given in our emotional experiences to choose to act on our emotions or not. To act on our emotions or not follow emotional instincts and reflect on more rational decision making. I'm going to have to parse this again. Give me a second. So would you say that the ability to have done otherwise is an extension of our ability to reflect on the potentiality given in our emotional experiences to choose to act in our emotions or not follow emotional instincts and reflect on more rational decision making? Yeah, okay, so let me, I don't know if I understand the question, but let me try to, oh, that was by Energy Dompter. I don't know why if I said that might be a question for him. The ability to have done otherwise, like conceptually for me, is incoherent. This is like, for me personally, like I don't think that I just like, or I guess when I think about what I could have done otherwise, it only means, or usually it could mean like, if I knew that I had a decision that I was making and I intentionally decided one of the options, then I there's some idea that I could have done otherwise if I had, but that's more like, it doesn't mean that I could have in a literal sense, like the underlying physical processes led me to feel most compelled by the way I went. So when I think I could have done otherwise, it's not in conflict with that drive that actually led me to do the thing that I did. It's more like just a theoretical, I could have done otherwise. There was another option there. Same with decisions I make where there, I might have not even been aware of that other option. I would have said like, oh, I decided to go to the bathroom. I could have gone to the kitchen instead. Like I could have done otherwise. There was no reason for me to go to the kitchen, but I could have done otherwise. But none of those are actually going to assault what's actually happening under the hood, which is actually making me go to the bathroom because of whatever reason I was going to the bathroom. Probably because I was going to the bathroom. But again, love your description of how a person experiences whittling down multiple potential actions to a single chosen one. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that's all Damasio. That's I got that from him. So I say this all the time, but I would highly recommend reading The Strange Order of Things. I thought that was a great book. Prosaic was a poorly used word. That means plain, and I should have said poetic. Prosaic, that's the SSRI. Oh, is that Prozac? Oh, nice. The point is you are making the decision, not the physical processes. Well, that's how you're understanding it. That's how you are conceptualizing the situation. And that conceptualization is afforded to you by your past, your culture, but really your underlying biology. You are predisposed you are predisposed in this very moment to recognize yourself as an object. Like we have the culture that allows us to do that in the way that we can. Like I would argue that people of 50,000 years ago did not have high fidelity conceptual understandings of themselves, because our concepts are connected to all kinds of things, and there were just fewer things to understand in the world. All right. Selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors come up in my search, didn't put it all together. I think maybe Energy Dompter is proposing some entity that's not affected by causation like a soul. Perhaps, yeah, what I'm trying to push, though, is there's only the experience, right? Like, this is a monism. It's a monism of experience. It's a monism, and the physical world is a concept within that experience, but it's not the physical world itself. The actual physical world was not invited. It's just the concept of the physical world. Otherwise, it just seems to run into the same. You don't choose your reasons to pick one option over the other. I think Gemini pointed this out too, or separate mind maybe, right? Okay, well, let's get back to the comparison so that we could then read through this. I keep making tangents that I want to capitalize on, or I want to actually follow. The article, self is a thinker. Okay, we did that. The thinker observes involuntarily thoughts arising from the subconscious and then chooses, using free will, whether or not to engage with them rationally. The document, the self is a process. The document conceptualizes the self not as a static thinker, but as a fundamental concept. So, yeah, this is tough, but a dynamic process or a narrative that is itself constructed by the brain's predictive processes. There is no separate you standing apart from the thoughts. You are the process of those thoughts unfolding. And then, of course, you see yourself in the thoughts. Like, the object of you appears like manifests in the thoughts you're having. So this is a version of you that's just making sense of the full holistic experience. And yeah. The mechanism of agency, how we choose. Top-down choice. Agency is a top-down volitional act. You make the primary choice to think, which then allows you to indirectly control your desires over time by consciously forming the values that cause them. And the document, recursive intervention. Agency is a recursive process. The brain is already engaging in an implicit activity of making commitments, predictions without your conscious input. Deliberate self-conscious reflection is not the start of the choice, but a tool that intervenes in this ongoing process. This reflection feeds back into our own predictive system as high salience data, thereby influencing its future trajectory. Yeah, the idea is that we have, like, we find ourselves in this position where we have an understanding that we can deliberately reflect on ourselves and our ability to reflect. So that's why I call it deliberate self-conscious reflection. And it's not the start of it's never the start. It's where you find yourself. It's always in the middle. Okay. What evidence could I possibly provide that would convince you that we have the free will to do otherwise between multiple choices? I don't know if this isn't. You would have to show evidence that our understanding of the physical, either our understanding of the physical world's wrong, our understanding of the brain is wrong. You'd have to contend with some of the things that, like, Sam Harris points out in his book, where, like, we have those, like, measurements of how we make decisions before we are even aware of the decision we're making or aware that we're about to make that choice. Like, those types of things really provide a counter argument that you have to contend with, and you have to make a reasonable argument as to why those don't make sense or don't apply. If you could prove doxastic voluntarism or a separate decision-making entity, I think that's another thing. Like, if you could find the soul, but even even if there was some, this is the point I make in the previous video or the recent video, is that even if you found some external soul that is actually, like, giving life somehow to our brain, the brain shows us enough that it's significantly involved in the process of our own self-understanding and our decision making. All neuroscience can show is that we have predispositions. What introspection shows is that we have the ability to act on our predispositions or not. Right, but where did that introspection, where did the contents of that introspection come from? What weren't those introspections predisposed? That's the tricky part. And this goes back to that whole Cartesian, the only thing that's true is our consciousness, and that's why we're not allowed to actually hold that as some absolute truism. It's similarly simply a predisposed conceptual understanding that we have. Okay. Implications for moral responsibility. The article, moral responsibility is in because you could have done otherwise. You are responsible for your actions, good or evil, because you had the primary choice to think or not to think and assess your values. Document, moral responsibility is defined differently. It's not about what you could have done. Is this looking to part 3 stuff already? Is this a sneak preview? Instead, it is a forward-looking investment in your future commitments. You are responsible to the process of freedom itself. So this isn't, I wouldn't say that we're at the moral yet, but we are at the normative sense of responsibility. This responsibility is the call of conscience. That's a term that Heidegger uses. I got it from Heidegger, which the document frames as a salient prediction error that invites you to engage in the process of realignment. This idea that when you're going into this autopilot mode, let's just say you intended to do something, and now you're going in autopilot, and your brain is giving you that signal that perhaps what you are doing is not what you intended to do, that you have this responsibility to abide by that, or to follow that signal. And not only that, you could think that perhaps you have a responsibility to look out for that signal. Like that's where we can kind of start creating a responsibility framework, like a meta responsibility framework from nothing. Like you have to be in tune. This is why Jordan Peterson's always like, you have to pay attention. You have to pay attention to what your mind is trying to tell you. This goes to homeostasis, and goes to mindfulness, meditation, clear the mind, make sure that you are in tune with your brain and body, etc. I mean, it makes intuitive sense with homeostasis because this is a process of regulation. Like these thoughts that are happening are for your own good in some sense, or at least they're in theory for your own good. Of course, once you find yourself in addiction, then these thoughts can be toxic. Okay. Shakespeare's King Lear made the kernel of the determinism argument, nothing will come of nothing. Nice. That's pretty baller to say. I gotta drop that one in IRL. All right. So I don't think that was the clearest explanation of the framework of freedom that we leverage, or that we come up with, but I think it was all right. But let's run through this. Our interpretive stance. Here we can situate our framework within collective knowledge as itself an interpretation. It is a product of its time, a narrative built using the contemporary English language and shaped by the cultural, scientific, and wisdom traditions available to us. It necessarily stands on the shoulders of countless thinkers who came before, and its perspective is inevitably filtered through that specific inheritance. At its most fundamental level, this exploration has been guided by our own intuitions regarding what makes sense, what feels rational, and what we believe leads to our desired ends. Yet we recognize that this is a communicative act, and we must balance our own sense of coherence against what a reader might comprehend and find sensible and practical. Because our framework holds that each person will infer the contents of this document differently, our task has been to write as precisely as possible so that our wide and varied audience arrives at a pragmatically similar understanding of what we are trying to convey. We open this document with a commitment to provide utility for a broad modern audience, and we accordingly impose the following criteria upon ourselves: internal coherence, explanatory power, and most importantly, practical utility. Our initial exploration of science and knowledge led us to a crucial starting point. Subjective experience is the fundamental lens of all epistemology. Therefore, to understand the world and our freedom within it, we had to begin by observing how meaning, purpose, and value manifest in our own experience. We could not talk about freedom until we had first built a plausible model of how the mind experiences it. Oh my gosh. All right. Is your argument that free will can't be logically believed in because even our introspection of our ability to act is influenced by predispositions? The argument is pragmatic, is that we ought not think about free will in a libertarian way because we understand the larger part of the story that leads the libertarian free will thinker to think that they have this level of freedom when they don't actually have this level of freedom, following what they imply that they have and following what we know about is what's actually happening underneath. So it's kind of like while there might be parts of the libertarian free will explanation that holds, useful or we would say is, matches what we might think is most apt. It does not provide the most apt or most practical even view of free will. So we try to come up with one that makes sense of that makes sense of our intuitions, makes sense of empirical science, and is practical. That's the whole idea here. Yeah. Or cause might be more on the nose. Oh, what was that in response to? Caused by predispositions? Nice sentence ending. Might comprehend and find sensible and practical. Fresh grammatical construction. Very readable. Oh, when was that? Might comprehend and find... I think we just read it. Sensible and practical. All right. We recognize this is a communicative act, and we must balance our own sense of coherence against what a reader might comprehend and find sensical. Oh, this is... Oh, I see. Might comprehend... Oh, so I know you said that fresh grammatical construction, but this might be slightly difficult to read. now that I'm looking at it, only because what a reader might find, what might comprehend. No. Okay, no, this makes sense. Okay, this follows the rules. This follows the rules of grammar. Might comprehend and find sensible and practical. Actually, no, the difficulty is this. Against what a reader might comprehend, it's ambiguous as to whether we've got a comma here or not, right? Right, and it's probably a comma, right? And find... We probably should just have the comma just for benefit. Because it's not what a reader might comprehend sensible and practical, which you might try to read, but it's might comprehend and find sensible and practical. I think that helps it slightly. Uh-oh. What was that? The please don't. It's refreshing to an experienced reader. Yeah, the whole idea in my mind is that we're trying to reduce ambiguity. So if someone would have read, like, failed at reading that, the comma is unnecessary here and interrupts the flow. I know there is like an interruption here, but the issue is that there's a way that you could read that, which is wrong. But when people see the comma, they know to stop here for sure. So we must balance our own sense of coherence against what a reader might comprehend. But okay, yeah, the comma's not great either. Oh man. This is tough. All right, I'll switch it back. We'll keep it for now. Because I do think the comma is just, it's worse in general, but there is that ambiguity where people might not realize that comprehend is the end of the idea, or the end of the first of these two. Like, this is one and this is one. Okay. We could not talk about freedom until we had first built a plausible model of how the mind experiences it. We leveraged the findings of modern science to build this model of experience and how it changes over time through the mechanisms of what we called predisposition. So how our predisposition changes over time. You know, whatever is affecting what I'm experiencing in the moment, we can think of as predisposing me to experience that in the moment. And we could look at predisposition in many different ways. We could look at it as the fundament or the underlying biology. We could look at it through the lens of my mood or certain drives, like if I'm hungry. We could look through it at a, DNA or my upbringing, my past, all these things that affect my disposition. Mark Twain tells a great story in his autobiography of a painter that President Ulysses, is it Ulysses? Grant's family hired to paint his portrait. The family was very happy with it, but then he fussed so much in perfecting the details of Grant's face that he ruined it, and everyone was disappointed in the end. So I think the story there is pretty on the nose. Yeah, unfortunately, there's an aspect of perfectionism in me that I don't think we're going to be able to shake, but I'm sure in the future I'll come up with a way that makes it not worse, but makes it still better than what it is right now. And that's the whole idea of this document. We're actually going to get there in a sense, in a second. So where were we? Okay, we then focused on understanding as a key aspect of our predisposition that we can intuit and engage with, conceptualizing its contents and our activity with. So this is why I'm always harping on understanding. It's like we're conceptualizing like what it is we must know in order for us to have the thoughts that we're having right now. Like, what must I understand for me to see this as a pen? Like, I must understand what a pen is. I must understand certain things about a pen depending on how I'm holding it. We're conceptualizing this underlying understanding. And obviously, whatever this understanding is, it would predispose me to see this as a pen and not, a dog. So, this entire path from the phenomenological to the scientific and back again was a necessary prerequisite to analyzing the nature of truth, freedom, and eventually the architecture of collective knowledge. At every step, our primary method has been a continuous integration of science and wisdom. We have aimed to draw upon powerful conceptualizations from our influences and simplify them for accessibility, while always striving to maintain precision. This commitment to grounding abstraction in intuition has been paramount. Every time we have discussed a high-level concept from meaning to archetypes, we have taken great care to ground it back in the felt subjective experience of an individual. The framework we arrived at is necessarily one interpretation among many possible ways of looking at the world. Our specific contribution has been an attempt at providing a more precise and comprehensive framing, synthesizing the insights of neuroscience, psychology, and philosophy into a single coherent story. In keeping with this same line of thought, we deliberately use the word can throughout this document to explicate all the ways we can think about these topics. Analogous to our discussions of the semantic and normative conceptual relations underlying our understanding, we can consider the dual meaning of this use. First, can suggests possibility. It is possible to think about these subjects in these ways. Second, can suggests authority and responsibility. Within the logic of our framework, we are allowed to do so, in the sense that it abides by our broader understanding. Ultimately, we have aimed to both abide by and build upon the norms we've inherited. Does Martin Heidegger discuss free will and being in time? No. Nah, I don't think he does. I don't think, free will would not make sense in that type of, I mean, if he was discussing free will, he would purport to say that we don't have it. Heidegger's account is very much the things that are happening we are not privy to. We are always being towards potential. We're always being towards death. Like, that's a huge deal. The fact that we're always finite in some sense. And finite for him is pointing out that our experience is going to change in the future. What we believe to be true is going to change in the future. It's like our life, the life of this moment, it has an end. We're finite here. Whatever I'm thinking right now isn't going to be the same forever. There isn't some absolute truth that is just infinitely true. We are finite, fundamentally. And we're always oriented towards that death, that edge of finitude. So yeah, Heidegger would not be thrilled by some absolute notion of free will. Okay. To further clarify our stance, we must also explicitly state what our framework, by its own rules, precludes. Notably, this framework precludes the possibility of achieving a transcendent, purely objective view from nowhere. Because all knowledge is mediated through the predictive, embodied, and socially conditioned brain, there is no way to step outside of our own interpretive lens. Furthermore, it precludes the idea of a final, complete, or static system of knowledge, as its core mechanism is one of perpetual dynamic learning. Furthermore, since the framework holds that all experience is necessarily structured by our understanding, it cannot claim to describe a raw consciousness. There it is. It cannot make claims about supernatural entities that intervene in the physical world. Its focus remains on the phenomenological and the scientifically plausible. Finally, it precludes a magical concept of free will that exists outside the causal nature of our biology, grounding our freedom instead within the emergent capacities of our self-conscious predictive minds. Ultimately, we have attempted to maintain a speculative, not a declarative tone, aiming to propose plausible connections, interpretations, and conceptualizations rather than assert them as definitive facts. This framework is a tool, a map, and a starting point for the reader's own journey, not a final destination. So then we get to the paradox and beauty of this framework, which is the final subsection of part 1. and then we'll call it a day. Our interpretive stance implies a central, unavoidable paradox. We have argued that this framework is a product of its time, shaped by the dynamic culture from which it emerged. Yet we have used this very framework, it's self-dependent on culture, to rationalize and justify our interpretation of how culture and knowledge evolve. Furthermore, since culture is not static but constantly evolving, we must recognize that our framework, no matter how useful it may be today, is inherently prone to stagnation. Over time, its concepts risk becoming outdated and its assumptions misaligned with a changing reality. In other words, this document would not have been helpful to people 500 years ago, and it may not be helpful for the people of tomorrow. We can embrace this paradox as a fundamental feature. The beauty of our framework lies not in a claim to timeless perfection, a direct apprehension of fixed truths, but in our self-conscious awareness of our own responsibility to counteract this inherent risk of stagnation. We can embrace the challenge that our framework is necessarily incomplete. While it offers conceptual structure to our experience, understanding, and freedom, it can never fully capture the richness of the present culture and the experiences it influences. By its own standards, then, this framework must be treated as a living document, not a final static work. It demands that we continually work to achieve and maintain coherence, precision, and practical utility. The paradox is not a flaw to be overcome, but a necessary responsibility and call to action. The framework's justification requires that the audience can comprehend and effectively utilize its contents. The beauty of... Whoa. Do you believe we have time for a recommendation related to cognitive biases? I don't think we have time tonight. I have to go to bed. But we will on Tuesday or Wednesday or tomorrow. Actually, just bring it tomorrow. I think we'll just be chilling tomorrow. And yeah, I have nothing set for tomorrow, so we can continue doing random stuff that people want to talk about. The beauty of this framework is that it explicitly justifies itself by self-consciously acknowledging its own contingencies and consequently accepting responsibility for them. That's the sentence. All right, we must be open to dialogue and engagement, open for updates and improvements as we closely analyze the framework's effectiveness, as we come up with new and arguably better ways of explaining things, as our broader collective knowledge evolves, and ultimately as our understandings shift in tandem with our culture. This makes each of us an active, responsible participant for ensuring the effectiveness and reliability of the framework. In this way, the very form of the framework, an open, provisional, and self-critical interpretation, perfectly mirrors the content of its message. That existence is a dynamic process of learning and adaptation. We cannot claim a final product. Instead, we must aim to continually realign our understanding toward the standards and criteria we have set out that we have set for ourselves. Here's the final paragraph. We have thus reached the end of our theoretical exploration. We have attempted to build not a perfect system, but an effective one, a map and a compass designed for the ongoing, dynamic, and ultimately personal journey of pursuing a meaningful life. Having established this foundation, we are now fully equipped for the practical applications to come. And that's what we are working on every Wednesday, when I'm not working on consciousness scripts. So come Wednesday, we will be back on to part 2. All the practical stuff now. So like the idea is that we now have this sense of freedom. It's something that I enjoyed the sample. Thank you very much. Yeah, this is cool stuff. By the way, I guess yeah, I do still have the thing. Like this document is public, so if anyone's ever, they want to just peruse or just sift through. The other cool thing about this document that I spent a lot of time doing is so right now we've got this part 1, but if you don't want to read part 1, we've got a TLDR, which is approximately a half as long, and we have main takeaways, which is approximately a fourth as long. And the main takeaways are pretty nice. You just have like a couple sentences, a couple paragraphs for each section that just kind of goes through the main stuff. So, but then if you ever were interested in it, you could always hit I want to read the full version of this, and then you could use the backspace and forward space, all that. Found the link to it on the Twitch page. Thank you. Yeah. Now, if you're ever interested, but that said, the more practical stuff is coming down the road. Part 1, all it gets to is just how we can think about freedom in relation to our experience and science and all that stuff. And at the end of the day, it's just, there's I kind of just set this up as three things to think about with freedom. Freedom through understanding. So the fact that understanding that that our understanding predisposes how we think about the world and ourself and what we can do in the moment. So that, you know, on one lens or one end, we can think about how we have this affordance right now. This is where we actually get into all the free will stuff. To determine what our freedom can be, we must first be clear about what our freedom has revealed it cannot be. And our exploration has challenged two common sense notions of free will. Right, we acknowledge that our brains are the result of prior material causes. We cannot authoritatively change the state of the physical world beyond the possibilities our own physical structure allows. So yeah, then the other pillar is that we can reflect. So we, from our understanding, we're afforded this idea that we could reflect on our own understanding, and that's a huge deal. Like we can deliberately, self-consciously reflect, and that's huge. And then there's this whole freedom through alignment. In a world of constant internal and external flux, how do we know we are actually progressing towards our goals? So in other words, how do we know that we're actually doing what we feel like we freely can do, or that we feel like we are doing in some free way? So this is why we talk about freedom as a process. We talk about freedom as an identity, an ongoing negotiation, and a process of continuous discovery revealed through how we engage with the world. Wonderful stuff. And yeah, this leads us to the practical path forward. So that's all part one stuff. Part two is going to be huge. Part two is going to have to be bigger than part one, and part one's already pretty big. So I don't know. We'll get there. We'll get there eventually. But it's all good fun. And the whole idea here is that this is a curriculum that I could teach for the rest of my entire life, and for it to still be effective. Obviously, that's, you know, with the stipulation that we have to update it when things need to be updated, and when people provide, you know, revisions and stuff like that we should leverage. I found the memoriam. Oh, the memoriam's sick. The memoriam's so cool. But yeah, no, this should be a fun pursuit that we can now continue back up on, given that we aren't stun locked by consciousness. Except I'm slightly still stun locked by consciousness, because I want to make a retrospective video that might be like 10 minutes long, but we'll see. If I may, I can provide a reason why that sentence is perfectly clear without the extra commas. Its syntax is made clear by the placement of verbs comprehend and find, and that's why the punctuation is a debate. Yeah, perhaps that is true. Yeah, I think the comma would be terrible, honestly. I take that back wholeheartedly. I think there's still ambiguity, but I do appreciate you pushing back on that, because I think the comma would have been pretty bad. It would have really made things difficult. But yeah, I don't think people will think I'm trying to say comprehend and then an adjective similar to find and an adjective. Usually it would have to be comprehend something as the adjective. So without the as there, I don't think people are going to be pushed towards that. So I think we're good. I think we're chilling. All right. The two adjectives are clearly tied to the final verb fine. I enjoyed the stream. Thank you for the lively, engaging discussion. Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, thank you for your participation in the lively, engaging discussion. Thank you for everyone's. Thank you for streaming. Thank you, Daniel, and thanks for the chatters. Hell yeah. Yeah, I appreciate everyone hopping in and keeping the conversations up. These are cool topics. We got to be prepared for when many more people are here, and you know, we have to be prepared to explain things to other people, and I have to be prepared to explain things obviously on my end. So it's all in good progression. So Have a good rest of the day, everyone.